This is Sin and Redemption, written by Cora Reilly, narrated by Lucy Rivers and Tor Tom. Trigger warning. This book deals with dark subject matter, such as pregnancy loss, death, torture, sexual abuse.
Chapter 1. Maximus. Sara was never supposed to become my wife. Of course, I had noticed her before. It was hard not to. She was a natural beauty with light brown doe eyes and beautiful caramel hair. Only a few years separated us, but she had already been promised to someone else, whereas I hadn't even wanted to consider marriage. She had taken care of her siblings and attended college, while I'd spent my days torturing enemies as enforcer, and my nights partying in clubs and banging random girls. Our paths had rarely crossed, until a single day forced our worlds to collide in the most devastating way. A day with the potential to shatter us and our future, if we let it.
Sara. I glanced at my watch again. I had been waiting at the main entrance of Barnard College for 10 minutes. Flavio never made me wait. After I closed the top buttons of my coat and readjusted my scarf, I took the steps down and headed toward the wrought iron gates that marked the end of campus and opened up to Broadway. I wasn't surprised when I didn't see his car. He always stopped right in front of the gates, so I could easily spot him from the entrance. People were busy coming and going, but there was nobody I knew. Many new faces had joined the row of distantly familiar ones now that the semester had started. Apart from a friendly nod here and there, nobody acknowledged me. Making friends outside of our Mafia world was difficult. There were always secrets, security concerns, and the fear of the person being an undercover police officer. I had my siblings, cousins, and my mom as friends, and I never had to hide who I was from them. I glanced at my watch again. Flavio, where are you? Worry filled me. I pulled my phone from my backpack to call Flavio when his name flashed on my screen. I smiled at the perfect timing. "You're late," I said without any reproach. I usually got carried away with tasks and forgot the time, so Flavio had to wait for me on more than one occasion. My brother was a saint, to me at least, so he never complained, and I definitely wouldn't because of one mishap. I promised Alea and Inessa I'd bake cookies with them. "My car broke down in the middle of nowhere after a job, Sara. I'm still waiting for someone to pick me up." I always felt a moment of sadness when I heard him talk about being a made man so casually, as if he wasn't only 17 and shouldn't be in school instead. But that was the world we had been born into, and so far it had been kinder to us than to others in our family. "Don't worry, just send Dad, or I can even take the trains." "You definitely won't take public transportation. Dad's in a meeting and too far away from campus. He told me to call Maximus. He had a job not far from where you are, so he's on his way to pick you up and take you to Dad. Mom, Alea, and Inessa are already in the Hamptons." "Maximus?" I asked, surprised. Maximus Trevisan and I had only chatted a handful of times at social functions. I hardly knew him. But if Dad and Flavio trusted him, then I had absolutely no reason not to. "He's trustworthy. You'll be fine." "I know. Don't worry. I'm not concerned about my safety. Take care of yourself and get to the Hamptons safely. I'm fine." "All right. See you later." I hung up, and right then a black pickup pulled up in front of me, despite the honks of a taxi who had to swerve past it and the very unfriendly hand signals of the driver. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see who was behind the wheel. The polished chrome of the rims reflected the sun. I shielded my eyes and squinted at the pickup. The window on the passenger side slid down, and I spotted Maximus's face inside the car. His dark hair was short, a bit longer at the top and mussed up, but not with hair products. It seemed he'd worked it in a disarray with his hands. "It's me, Maximus Trevisan. Your father sent me," he said in a deep baritone voice that sent a tiny shiver down my back. I cleared my throat, confused by my body's reaction. My fingers on my leather tote bag tightened, and I stepped up to the vehicle. But before I could reach for the handle, Maximus jumped out, rounded the hood, and opened the door for me. "There you go. Another taxi stopped behind us and gestured wildly for Maximus to move his pickup. After one dark look from Maximus, the driver squeezed past us. I peered up at him, warmth creeping over my cheeks. He was more than a head taller than me, and his tight white t-shirt did little to hide his muscles and tattoos. I wondered how many hours he had to spend in the gym to look like this, and then decided I had no business contemplating that. I tore my gaze away and climbed into the passenger seat, confused by the residue heat in my body. Maximus closed the door, then jogged to the driver's side and got in. "Buckled up?" he asked, unfazed. I nodded, still trying to determine why I felt slightly lightheaded in his proximity. Maximus was attractive, with strong features, sharp cheekbones, a pronounced chin, and a very trained body. The most astonishing thing about him was his eyes, though. The unusual amber stood out against his almost black brows and thick black lashes. But I didn't like tattoos, not just his, and he had many of them at first glance and probably more hidden beneath his clothes, but in general. And the stories I'd heard about Amos and his partying had never really made him attractive in any way. "Your dad sent me. He knows we're alone," Maximus implored as he started the car. He obviously thought my silence was due to unease, which wasn't the case, at least not in the way he assumed. I gave him a quick smile, then loosely wrapped my arms around my leather tote bag. The feel of the smooth leather beneath my fingertips calmed me. My younger and outgoing sister, Inessa, often accused me of being too comfortable because I never sought contact with people outside our extended family, even at social functions. Suddenly alone with someone I didn't know well, I realized how awkward I was because of laziness. "I know. I'm grateful you agreed to help." He pulled out of the parking lot. One of his arms was casually draped over the center console while he steered the vehicle with the other. "Sure. You need to get to your father safely." Silence fell over us as we headed out of the busier part of Manhattan. Broadway was always a nightmare traffic-wise at this hour. I wasn't sure what to talk to Maximus about. After a day packed with courses, my brain was too frazzled to come up with topics we might have a common interest in. He probably didn't want to hear about how medieval art depicted the plague and eschatology. Instead, I leaned back and gazed at the scenery passing the window. I hoped he wouldn't take offense, but even knowing very little about him, he seemed like the type of person who preferred silence over idle chit-chat. "We'll have to take a detour because of a major accident, and your father's meeting was outside Manhattan," Maximus explained. I simply nodded and closed my eyes. "Fuck!" His roar made me jump in surprise after I started drifting off. Before I could ask why he cursed like that, the truck swerved to the left. I let out a startled cry and clutched my bag. My gaze darted to Maximus, hoping for an explanation, but his attention shifted between the rearview mirror and the street ahead. I turned around in my seat to find out what was going on. 3 cars were close behind us, driving in a manner that suggested they didn't care about traffic laws. Maximus swerved the vehicle around a corner and picked up his phone. "We're being followed." My eyes widened when one of the cars sped up even more. It collided with our rear, and my head hit the side window. Everything turned black.
Chapter 2. Maximus. Fingers raked through my hair. A soothing touch that made me want to purr like that stray cat that occasionally visited my parents' shelter and drove our dogs absolutely mad. I wanted to keep my eyes closed and enjoy it, but the scent of blood and my lack of memory of where I was shook me from my state of calm. I peeled my eyes open. They felt heavy, and when my vision finally cleared, a woman's face with big brown doe eyes came into focus right above me. It took several moments before I recognized Sara. Her fingers were responsible for the gentle touch, and it must have been her blood I'd smelled because the left side of her brown hair was matted from a head injury. "You're hurt," I rumbled. My voice sounded even deeper and rougher than usual. I cleared my throat, but it felt as if I hadn't drunk anything in days. "You're worse," she said with a faint smile. She looked pale, And even though I wasn't familiar with her facial expressions, she was clearly scared. I sat up, raising my head from Sara's warm lap. Her clothes were covered in blood where my head had rested. I touched my scalp and face, sticky with blood. I couldn't recall what had happened. All I remembered was talking to Romero and picking up Sara at his request. I looked around and my body switched to high alert. We were in a cage, something that looked and smelled as if a wild animal might have lived in it. Maybe some wild cat. The Bratva was big in the smuggling of endangered species. The cage was in a big warehouse near the harbor, considering many bigger wild animals arrived in shipping containers. The walls had been covered with noise-dimming materials. 3 more cages were beside ours. All of them empty. No. A half-dead bloody figure lay on the floor in the cell farthest from us. The man was still alive, but by the state he was in and the amount of blood pooling beneath him, I knew he wouldn't be alive much longer unless someone helped him. Was he one of ours? Captured by the enemy? We had many of them, but this couldn't be the outfit's doing. Their capo, Dante, would never allow a woman to get hurt. The Camorra and Remo were certainly capable of every imaginable atrocity, but I didn't think it was them either. That left the Russians or the bikers. Neither option was good. Neither would spare Sara. My gaze found her again as she huddled beside me on the floor. Her blouse and skirt were covered in blood, mine and hers. "I'll get us out of here," I promised without thinking. I didn't have a hero complex. My job rarely allowed for acts of heroism. I did the dirty work. I maimed and killed. I didn't save lives. She licked her lips. "Is this the outfit?" I could hear the faint note of hope in her voice. The outfit would have been her best bet. Fuck, I wished it was them. My fate would be the same no matter the enemy, but for Sara's safety, it mattered. I considered lying to lessen her fear, but my face must have given the truth away. Disappointment filled her eyes. "It's not, right?" "No," I said simply. I was as good a liar as I was a hero, unfortunately for Sara. I rose to my feet and glanced at the half-dead man in the other cell. From this vantage point, I could see more cages on the other end of the warehouse. Snow leopards, orangutans, and a few bears with black fur slept in them, probably drugged to the max. Sara stood too and followed my gaze. Her eyes grew wide. "Why are there animals here?" "They're contraband." "And what are we?" Sara whispered. I didn't have an answer to that question. Bait? Leverage? A soon-to-happen bloody message? Sara's gaze moved to the cage with the bloody human body, and she swallowed visibly. "He hasn't moved yet. Is he dead?" "No. His chest is rising. He wouldn't make it much longer from the looks of it, though. Maybe they would feed him to the leopard later. It was a good way to get rid of the evidence." "What do they want with us?" I regarded Sara. She was beautiful, young, untouched. It wasn't difficult to guess what some of our enemies would do to her. Had she been the target, or me? I was notorious among our enemies for my brutal treatment of captives. Many wanted to get their hands on me to pay me back, but I wasn't even supposed to pick Sara up. That was a last-minute change of plans. Had someone followed me unnoticed? That was something I would have to figure out later. If there was a later. I would definitely be tortured. I could stand the torture. I wasn't concerned about that. But they would instrumentalize Sara, and that was a factor I couldn't predict. I needed to protect her no matter the cost. I had promised Romero to bring Sara to him safely, and seeing her scarred face, I wanted to protect her on a deeper level too. In recent years, 2 Famiglia girls who should have been safe were targeted. I had to protect Sara from becoming another victim of our feud. Keys rattled, and a door to our side opened with a squeaky sound. The moment I saw the face of the first man entering the room, I knew things were fucking bad. If it had been just me in this damn cell, things would already have been shitty. But with Sara in the picture, it was disastrous. Jabba tilted his head. I almost forgot his real name. Everyone called him Jabba because he looked like the ugly-ass creature from the Star Wars movies. What an unexpected guest. What an unexpected guest. He drawled with a heavy Russian accent, sounding twice as stupid as he was, which was a feat, considering how big of an idiot he was. It didn't make him less dangerous. He made up for his lack of intelligence with ruthless brutality, which had cost his men their lives on more than one occasion. He was one of the most important soldiers of the Bratva in our territory. When the Pakhan was away yachting somewhere in Europe, these idiots tried to hold down the fort. Jabba caused us more than one headache in the past. Because of that, he was very high on our kill list. And he knew. He might have ended up on my torture table one day like his cousin and uncle had only a couple of weeks ago. Now, things didn't look too good for me and Sara. Revenge could be the motive, and Sara got caught in the crossfire. I didn't dare look her way. I didn't want Jabba's attention on her. Of course, his ugly, bulging eyes zoomed in on her right away. It was hard not to look at her. Even if she seemed unaware of her own beauty, it was a beacon in these bleak surroundings. "And look at you," he said, then let out a whistle and gave her a dirty smile. "This wasn't the plan, but I think I can make it work." He nodded, making his double chin wobble. "I can make it work." He stopped an arm's length from the bars. My muscles tensed in anticipation. "Scared to get too close?" I taunted. He cackled, but didn't let me bait him into coming any closer. He was stupid, but not that stupid. "Not today, devil," he smirked. "Not today, devil." "For fuck's sake, stop repeating everything you say, Jabba." I just wanted to shut him up for good, preferably with his cut-off tongue. Anger flashed in his eyes. "What's your name, puppet?" Sara's face was paper white, and her hands shook, but she held her head high and tried to appear unfazed, without success. Fuck. She looked like something straight out of Jabba's wet dreams. White wool tights, plum-colored tartan skirt, and a white blouse. Even though I wasn't into the schoolgirl fantasy, Sara ticked all my boxes. "Sara Concio." I cringed inwardly. Concio was a name the Russians knew. Romero had loyally supported Lucas' quest to kill them for decades, long before wars with bikers and the outfit had taken up our resources. Yes, he said. His gaze traveled the length of her, and my muscles clenched in wariness. Fuck. This could be really bad. I had to figure out how to get Sara out of this. "You're a real doll. A real—" He stopped himself from repeating the word with a glance in my direction. I smirked at him. If I turned his anger on me, Sara might be spared until help arrived. I could only pray that I'd sent a call for help before we got caught. But I still couldn't remember a fucking thing. Jabba tilted his head like a fat bulldog and clucked his tongue as he leered at Sara. She took a step back. "I would love to sink my cock into her Italian pussy," the man beside Jabba said. He was tall and made of sinewy muscle that made me believe he had a background in kickboxing or another combat sport, making him more of a threat than Jabba. "You'd be dead before you could even get your small dick out," I growled, stepping in front of Sara. They would have to come in to grab her. That might give me a chance to attack. "You two aren't promised, are you?" Jabba muttered. "No, we're not," Sara said firmly. Her decision to answer so quickly, as if the possibility of being promised to me was unbearable, rubbed me the wrong way. I knew some people in the Famiglia still regarded my family as less worthy because of my father's family history. But Sara's father, Romero, had never seemed like he was one of them. Jabba tilted his head and thought. "Don't hurt yourself thinking too much," I said with a chuckle. Jabba's lips pulled into a grin. "I really like young pussy, but I'm also a businessman. I know you Italians think you're more clever than us Russians." "Definitely more clever than you," I taunted. I'd met many very intelligent Bratva soldiers in the past. Under the current Pakhan, intelligence just wasn't a priority anymore. Sara gave me a worried look. She obviously thought my provocation would make our situation worse. She didn't know these guys. They wouldn't show us mercy. All I could do at this point was to provoke them into stupid actions that might give me an opening to kill them and allow Sara the chance to escape. Or, at the very least, bode enough time for her. If they started torturing me and ignored her for the time being, that could be enough to spare her a lot of pain and humiliation. Just the thought of Jabba or one of his men touching Sara made me sick. Jabba simply smiled stupidly. Luca isn't the unquestioned king over his empire like he used to be. Some don't like that he's gotten himself in a war with us, the bikers, the Cora, and the outfit. Lots of enemies to have. Luca has loyal men who'll die for him. I think I'll be patient today, Jabba said. I don't care for virgins, you know. All the squealing and whining grates on my nerves, you know. And I have a new wife. I can't fuck around so soon. My stomach tightened. Sara looked even paler than before. She was clever. She knew this was heading in a very, very dangerous direction. Fuck. How can I save her? Luca put a lot of trust in you Trevisan men, and your dad is one of Luca's most loyal followers. He said the last with a nasty look at Sara. Sow discord. That's what wise men do. It destroys from the inside. I had no clue what the fuck he was talking about. From the empty expression on his men's faces, neither did they. If they followed Jabba's command, they weren't the brightest candles on the cake. This is what's going to happen, Maximus. You're going to fuck the pretty doll. I bet you've been secretly lusting after a high-ranking pussy like hers. With your fucked-up family history, a cunt like hers is out of reach, all right? I stared at him, blood pumping in a vein at my temple. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sara's horrified expression. I won't touch her, I gritted out. No? Jabba raised his bushy eyebrows. I think you will. Or do you want Yevgeny to go first? I stormed toward the bars, gripped them, and tore at them like a madman. They shook in my hold. Some plaster fell, but the bars didn't give in. Jabba took a step back. Nobody will touch her. You will, Jabba said. Or we will all fuck her in front of you. Or maybe we'll just put a bullet in her head, because she's not part of our plan. They would fuck her either way. Unless someone saved us, or I got my hands on Jabba, it was inevitable. Yevgeny will record everything for Romero's and Luca's enjoyment. I hear that's what people do nowadays. Record nasty stuff and post it everywhere. I pressed my lips together. Rage and despair flooding my body. I didn't want to look at Sara. Fuck, we were doomed. Don't play noble, Maximus. You're a bad man. And bad men always want what they shouldn't, Jabba said. He was right. I was one of the worst in the Famiglia, as bad as they come, but I never wanted Sara. I had never allowed my thoughts to go that way. I had gone after the available pussies in the clubs. Why would I set myself up for disappointment? I took a step back from the bars, then thrust my entire weight against them again. More plaster rained down on us. Jabba and Yevgeny pulled guns on me, but I jumped against the bars again. A shot rang out, missing Sara's head by a couple of inches. Sara shrieked and dropped to her knees. I froze in my tracks. Grab a phone to record everything, Jabba ordered Yevgeny. The bikers didn't break the Famiglia when they recorded Marcella. They only fueled our rage. No matter what you record now, our rage will burn even brighter. Sure, but this time, one of your own is hurting a poor Famiglia woman. That's going to sting. I heard a story of how warlords in Africa break the morals of their enemies. They forced fathers and brothers to rape their own family. Clever, right? I grimaced. sickened by his words, but I didn't say anything. Things weren't looking good, and I knew they'd get far worse if we didn't get help soon. Yevgeny took out his phone and held it up, ready to begin filming. My mind was blank. What was I supposed to do? I'd never forced a woman. I'd never understood how a guy could get off on it. I finally glanced toward Sara. She sat motionless on the ground, face ashen, eyes full of fear. Her white tights were ruined, ripped and covered in dirt and blood. Her gaze met mine, and she swallowed hard. Fuck. Chapter 3. Maximus. Time's running out. You have exactly 5 minutes to fuck her. Or we'll do it, and maybe cut her a little while we do. I've never tried blood play. Maybe it's worth the hype. I took a step towards Sara. She became even more still, if that was possible. With Jabba's, Yevgeny's, and a third man's keen eyes on us, I moved toward her even if it was the last thing I wanted. I memorized each face for later reference. One day their faces would be scrunched up in agony and beg me for mercy. I got down on my haunches right in front of Sara. No secret messages or whispering, Jabba roared. Sara stared right into my eyes, and I had a hard time not looking away. Her doe eyes killed me with their softness and fear. I'll pretend, I mouthed, hoping she understood despite her agitated state. I'd never pretend fuck someone. She didn't react, and the fear in her face increased. I tried again. She shook her head slowly. She obviously didn't get what I meant. This was a fucking mess. You only have 4 minutes now. I guess quick fucks are your thing, Max? I touched her shoulder, but before I could push her back, she lay down on her back on the dirty concrete floor. I looked her in the eyes as I reached into her skirt and grabbed the waistband of her tights and her panties. She tensed as I pulled them down her legs, but she didn't fight. She knew this was the only chance to protect her from the Russian's touch, and maybe even death. They wouldn't pretend like me. She remained still as I unzipped my pants and pulled them down. My cock was limp, but I didn't need a hard-on for what I had planned. I moved between her legs, shoved up her skirt, then pretended to thrust into her. Sara closed her eyes with an audible wince. I wasn't sure if her reaction or my thrusts were convincing. I couldn't think straight. My thoughts only revolved around 2 things: killing Jabba and our escape. The assholes had even taken the knife I had in a small holster at my ankle. I only had my own body. I'd been trained for many years to make it as lethal as possible, and it was deadlier than many weapons, but I needed proximity to use it. A sob from Sara made me look down at her again. Sara's cheeks turned red, and she looked away from my eyes as I thrust again. My naked skin touched her inner thigh. I hated that she had to experience this. You think I'm stupid? I froze mid-thrust and glanced over my shoulder at Jabba. His head was purple, and a vein on his forehead throbbed. That dick of yours isn't anywhere near that virgin pussy. You have 2 more minutes to fuck her like you mean it, or I'll call all of my men and let them have a go at her in whatever sick way they like. And some of them are sick fucks, trust me. And afterward, I'll throw her in the cage with the bears or the leopard. They'll be hungry after their long journey. It's okay, Sara said in the quietest whisper. I looked at her, but she had her eyes closed, and her face turned away as if she didn't want to see me. You better get her naked quickly. The seconds ticked by. Everything in me revolted against what I needed to do. I closed off my thoughts and acted. I ripped Sara's skirt away, leaving her naked from the waist down. Then I kicked down my own pants. Would this save Sara from a worse fate? Was I even a better fate than any of the assholes standing in line to fuck her next? This was wrong on so many levels. My head throbbed, and my dick was still far from stiff. I closed my eyes, ignoring the phone recording what I did and everything around me. Even Sara. I couldn't think of her terrified eyes when I wanted to get it up. I gripped my cock and stroked myself furiously, imagining all the sexy girls I'd fucked in the past. I wasn't sure how long it took me to get hard. Jabba's cackling in the background told me too long. Fuck him. Fuck this. When I had it up, I opened my eyes, and I wished I hadn't, because the sight of Sara beneath me with her eyes closed, waiting for me to fuck her, almost killed my erection. 10 seconds. I'm not impressed. I didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, I thrust as far into her as her body allowed. She let out a choked sob, her face scrunched up in pain and lips pressed together. This is the most boring fuck I've ever watched. I really hope you make her scream, or I'll be very disappointed. And you don't want that. Yevgeny guffawed like a baboon. I thrust again, and I didn't look away as I did. I deserved to see the pain and tears on Sara's face, even if it killed me. I deserved worse for what was happening. I became numb inside, only aware of the rough concrete against my palms and the fine sheen of sweat on my forehead. Time seemed to stand still as I finally closed my eyes like a coward and returned to a scene with an imaginary woman. During our training to withstand torture, I learned to transport myself to a different place in my mind. It was a sort of hypnosis that could make you ignore pain for a long time. I never would have thought I'd have to use it in a situation like this. A door banged against a wall. Someone screamed something in Russian. I only understood the word Italians because I had heard it from Bratva soldiers in the past. My fantasy dissipated, and I was back to reality. Quick! Jabba roared. Opening my eyes, I pushed off Sara and staggered to my feet. Jabba and Yevgeny and the third man rushed away from the door through which they'd come in earlier. Yevgeny had his phone with him. I stormed against the bars again and again, trying to tear them down so I could chase them. My head rang from the impact. Blood spurted from my nose and a cut on my head, but I didn't stop. The pain felt fucking good. It was well deserved. Definitely not enough. They disappeared through a narrow door at the back of the hall. I froze, my head ringing with pain. In my peripheral vision, I saw how Sara pushed herself into a sitting position. Her cheeks were tear-stained, and she winced in pain as she moved. The door beside our cell swung open, and several Famiglia soldiers stormed in with guns drawn. Of course, Romero was one of them. I released a harsh breath, turned my back to the bars, and sank down. I was still naked from the waist down. The clinking of keys sounded, and Romero entered the cell a moment later. I didn't move from my spot on the floor. His eyes took it all in. Sara's panties and skirt discarded in a corner of the cell. My half-undressed state. The way she huddled against the wall with her legs pressed up against her body to preserve her modesty. It wouldn't take a genius to figure out what I'd done. I wouldn't stop Romero from getting the revenge he deserved. Fuck. I was ready for a bullet from him, even torture. I wouldn't even try to escape into a fantasy world in my head. I'd allow the pain. Someone knelt in front of me. For a moment I thought it was my best friend Amo, but the blonde hair quickly told me it was his brother Valerio. You okay? I stared at him. Once you put a bullet in my head in mercy, I will be. He narrowed his eyes at me and tossed my jeans at me. There wasn't compassion on his face. He was a Vitello through and through. Compassion wasn't part of their programming. Get dressed. We need to leave. My father's going to ask a lot of questions. I put on my pants, then let him pull me to my feet. My eyes went to Sara. Romero had his arm wrapped around her shoulders. She was dressed again, but didn't look my way as he led her out of the cell. Neither did he, though I suspected for very different reasons. He probably didn't want to kill me in front of his shaken daughter. I watched them leave, then followed Valerio out of the cell. Did you catch any of the Russians? I asked. One of them. A guard. Not Jabba. No. I nodded. Maybe Luca would allow me to help them hunt Jabba and his men as a last service. He knew how good I was at my job. He definitely wouldn't do it out of charity. Valerio took me to a meeting house in Brooklyn. We were the first to arrive. My skin itched and my skull throbbed fiercely, but I didn't say anything. I wanted nothing more than a shower. Valerio and I went to the room that Luca used for meetings on occasion. I sat on one of the hardwood chairs. "The doc's on his way to check on you." I shook my head. "He needs to focus on Sara. I think Romero and Liliana will take her to a female doctor." I nodded, then looked down at my feet. The door opened with a soft creak. 2 heavy sets of steps sounded. I recognized them. I rose to my feet, then forced my gaze up because I wouldn't act like a fucking coward. Amo and Luca strode toward me. Like father, like son. Gray eyes, black hair. But while Luca's expression was thunderous, Amo appeared emotionless. Before I got a chance to analyze the look in Amo's eyes, Valerio was already in front of him. They talked quietly for a moment. I wasn't surprised that they kept secrets. When Amo finally came my way, he looked seriously pissed. We'd been best friends for half of our lives. I'd always known it would take a major fuck-up for that to change. Amo put his hand on my shoulder. "They played the wrong cards, those bastards. The bikers didn't succeed, nor will they." Surprise following confusion shot through me until it dawned on me. "The video?" Amo nodded severely. His gray eyes searched mine. How many had already seen what had happened? "They sent it to my father, me, and a few others." "They didn't put it up on social media?" "Not yet. They're on the run. Maybe that will give us some time. I need to know everything that happened. Every fucking detail," Luca said. The door to the room opened at that moment, and Romero walked in, followed by Flavio and Matteo. Matteo, as consigliere, would know every detail of what had happened. "I want to be there," Romero said firmly. "So do I," Flavio agreed. Neither looked my way. Their features, hair, and eye color reminded me of Sara, making it hard to look at them. Luca frowned, but then he gave a terse nod. Matteo's eyes only briefly rested on me before he joined Luca. Amo was still at my side even as the others lined up across from me like a tribunal. I wanted to ask about Sara. I needed to know she was okay, or as okay as she could possibly be, but the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I turned to Amo. "You should go to them. I'm by your side because you look like you need support. Did you watch the video?" "I know what happened." "No, you don't, or you wouldn't be by my side. Watch the video." Amo scowled. "I won't. I don't need to." Luca ran a hand through his hair before he leveled a hard look at me. I held his gaze. I would accept whatever consequences he decided on. I wasn't usually someone who gave up without a fight, but in this case, to dish out revenge as quickly as possible. We need to get as much information as possible, as fast as fucking possible, Luca said. His voice rang with barely restrained fury. He looked more furious than Romero and Flavio. Neither of them was known for violent outbursts unless required, but the tension in their bodies and the tight set of their identical lips told me a flood of emotions set right under the surface, ready to be unleashed. "I'll tell you everything I know, so you can punish me accordingly. I'd like to talk to my family before you deal with me, though." My calm voice was detached, and my insides matched my tone. I felt numb. I'd never felt this way, despite the many brutal acts I had to commit in the name of the Famiglia. Luca released a slow breath, then glanced at Romero and Flavio. "I know this is difficult, and emotions are on the rise." He paused before he turned to me. "You failed to protect Sara and yourself from being captured. That's the only transgression I see worthy of punishment. What happened after?" He looked toward Romero, who met his gaze, his eyes full of anguish. "Happened because you had no choice." I shook my head, not sure he understood. "I should have picked her up," Flavio muttered. "I would have protected her." Accusation rang in his voice, and when he finally met my gaze, it burned in his eyes too. I wasn't sure if that was true. As far as I recalled from my spotty memory, there had been too many enemies. But the fact remained that I had probably been the Bratva's target, and Sara had only been collateral damage. Or not. And then you might have been in the horrible position to do to your sister what Max was forced to do. Amo said firmly. He still stood by my side. I'd forever be grateful to him for his loyalty. Flavio's expression twisted with disgust. I would have never. You would have let the Russians have a go at her? Amo countered. Would you have fucked Marcella if the bikers had captured you too? Amo tensed, his face becoming stone. Luca looked ready to go completely berserk. Jabba had done a good job of sowing discord. Maybe he wasn't as stupid as I thought. If it came to acts of brutality, he had more creativity than I'd expected. Matteo crossed his arms and regarded me with a stoic calm. He had been unusually silent so far. His lack of jokes and the fact that he hadn't bothered styling his hair to perfection like a runway model told me things couldn't be worse. This discussion doesn't lead us anywhere. Maximus isn't related to Sara, and he did what needed to be done in a fucking shitty situation. Even Sara knew it. You heard what she said to him. I swallowed hard at the mention of Sara. How is she? I pressed out, my voice rough and low, every word scratching my throat. Maybe that was how Dad felt when he talked. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Maybe I didn't deserve to know. Liliana took her to a doctor. She's doing okay, physically, Romero said quietly. His brown eyes were carefully controlled as he leveled them on me. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. I'd always felt the utmost respect for Romero. He was a loyal and very skilled made man. Today I admired him even more. It couldn't be easy to stay calm in a situation like this. If our roles had been reversed, I would have already killed him in a fit of rage. The door swung open. Dad entered the room. With barely a nod toward the others, he stalked toward me. His expression was unreadable. He'd always had my back, but I wasn't sure how he felt today. Many people said I not only resembled him with my dark hair, tall frame, and amber eyes, but also his character. He gripped my shoulder and looked me in the eyes. Then he squeezed and gave a slight nod. I'm here. My heart swelled. I gave a grateful nod in return. I wasn't the type to put into words how much this meant to me, nor was he the type who liked to listen to emotional admissions. We need to figure out how to get revenge. This needs to be at the forefront of our thoughts. We can't change what happened, but we can make sure every fucker involved gets what he deserves, Amo said. Luca nodded. Revenge will be our main focus. It'll be our first thought in the morning and our last thought at night. I don't care what it takes to kill every fucker involved. Romero met my gaze. I want you to help us get revenge. You're one of the best when it comes to hunting and torture. My chest constricted. I will do everything in my power to give Sara and your family the revenge you all deserve. I won't rest until every Bratva asshole in this city has died the most painful death imaginable. Dad nodded. We'll get revenge, and it'll be brutal and merciless. And we need to make sure our enemies realize we aren't easy prey just because we have enemies in every fucking corner, Amo said angrily. He didn't agree with his father's choice to attack the Cora and make them the enemy too. That's why they picked this moment to attack. They think we're weakened by too many wars. Luca's expression was tight with rage. He and Amo had butted heads on that matter before. I wasn't sure if Amo was right. If the Russians had attacked because we had another enemy in the Cora. We're not any weaker than before. The Cora never helped with matters in our territory. But we can't focus on the Bratva like we used to, because now we need to watch our backs. Ramo will attack at some point. Ramo isn't my fucking concern right now. If you hadn't started things with Greta, the situation would be very different. I don't care what led to this point, Romero said tightly. All I care about is my daughter, who suffers innocently. I want revenge, and I want it as soon as possible. It won't help Sara, but since it's all I can do, I'll do it. I nodded. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I'd do anything in my power to kill Jabba and his crew. It wouldn't make Sara forgive me, but I'd never dare ask for her forgiveness anyway.
Chapter 4. Sara. Mom kept glancing my way on our way home from the doctor. 2 bodyguards sat in the front, while we were in the back seat of the SUV. 4 more bodyguards followed us in 2 black cars. I'd never been on the receiving end of so much protection, but I had been glad. Of course, even my protection had been upped after bikers had kidnapped Marcella, but I'd still enjoyed so much freedom. I swallowed as my thoughts drifted back to what had happened. Goosebumps rose on my skin and I shivered. The movement increased the soreness between my legs, another reminder of the horrors of this day. Is there a chance of a pregnancy? The doctor's question flashed in my mind. Mom had been horrified, and so had I. Until that moment, I hadn't even considered that this humiliation might lead to further consequences. I shivered again. I hadn't been able to answer the question. I wasn't stupid. Of course I knew that intercourse always meant a chance of conception, but the chances would increase drastically if Maximus... I stopped myself from following that train of thought. I wanted to forget, to pretend it never happened. Mom squeezed my hand even tighter. We'll get through this. No matter what happens next, we'll get through this as a family. I'm supposed to marry in 2 months. You're still marrying. Mom searched my face. Nobody would have pegged her for a woman in her mid-40s, but she looked her age today. Her naturally dark blonde hair hardly showed any gray, and except for a few fine lines around her eyes from smiling so much, she had no wrinkles. Unless you don't want to. I wasn't sure what I wanted. But if I was pregnant with Maximus's child, I couldn't marry another man. I'm sure Paolo will gladly raise the child as his own. Sometimes it was scary how well Mom knew my train of thought. I bit my lip, my eyes burning with a new wave of tears. Would Paolo really want that? Did I? I don't want a child from an act like that. Mom swallowed, then nodded slowly. Of course. I understand. If you're pregnant, we'll deal with it. Mom wasn't fond of abortions, but I knew she'd have my back no matter what I decided. Deep down, I knew that I would keep the baby because I wasn't sure if I could live with the guilt. Unlike many other girls who faced the same impossible decision, I had enough family support and money. I'll keep it if I'm pregnant, but I hope I'm not. Mom squeezed my hand again, but we didn't talk anymore. I was exhausted mentally and physically in a way I'd never experienced. My body wanted to sleep, but my mind was scared of the images I'd relive. When we arrived at our home, I felt a sense of safety I hadn't until now. My body ached faintly, but the painkillers had started to kick in. Usually, I wouldn't have taken meds for the level of discomfort I felt between my legs, but I just didn't want to be reminded of what had happened every moment of the day. It wouldn't be easy to forget, but I wanted to try. I left Inessa and Alea with Aria in the Hamptons, so you can recover in a quiet surrounding. Mom meant well, but quiet was the last thing I wanted right now. I feared the voices I'd hear once it became quiet around me. I wanted distraction and normalcy. I wanted to be the Sara from this morning, not the one I could feel myself turning into. I wanted to cozy up with a sweet small-town romance, eat homemade cookies, and listen to my sisters bickering. I wanted to be safe in the knowledge of what my future held. Oh, you want them home? Mom said after a glance at my face. I just thought... She let out a shaky breath. I didn't really think. I just did what I hoped was best. It's okay. Let them stay with Aunt Aria tonight. It's already too late to have them come home. Maybe it's better if I have until tomorrow to compose myself before they see me. I don't want them to be worried about me. I hesitated. Do they know what happened? We didn't tell them much. Just that you were captured, but could be saved quickly. Not quick enough. My belly constricted. We got out of the car. 2 bodyguards followed us. I was glad I couldn't read anyone's thoughts. Their expressions were enough to make me want to hide. It was already 8:30, but I was scared to go up to my room alone, despite my need to shower. Can you come with me? I need to grab a shower. Tears welled up in my eyes. Even our cozy home, a place that had always made me feel safe and happy, only made me realize how much had changed since this morning. Looking at the many family photos on our walls depicting a smiling Sara with bright, hopeful eyes felt like a slap. Mom nodded quickly, her fight for composure as clear as day on her face. I didn't break down in the shower, as I'd feared. I felt oddly detached from myself, from the situation. Maybe it was a temporary thing, my mind's way to protect me. I was glad for the reprieve. After the shower, Mom and I curled up on the sofa in our living room, covered with wool blankets, and watched a Disney movie. My mind was far away, but seeing the colorful images rush by felt good. I was glad Mom had decided against our usual choice of a cliched romantic Hallmark movie. The mere idea of seeing people being romantic when my chances of ever experiencing the same were nil made me recoil. My eyes began to droop when the lock disengaged and Flavio and Dad returned home. Mom sat up and I did too. Dad and my brother looked exhausted and guilty. Guilt was always involved for Mafia men when their girls or women got hurt. It's not your fault, Flavio, I said firmly before he could utter an apology. There were too many. You alone couldn't have done anything different from... I took a deep breath. Maximus. Saying his name took effort. I hadn't even dared to think about him up to this point. His brown brows drew together, a muscle in his jaw working as he processed my words. We don't know that. And I'll always wonder... We'll get revenge. Luca gave Flavio, Maximus, and me the okay to focus our efforts on finding the culprits. Maddox will help too. Surprise shot through me. Dad's expression became cautious and concerned. Sara, Luca won't punish Maximus, and I chose not to ask him to. Mom's face twisted with disbelief, and she sat up straight on the sofa. You can't be serious! Her anger on my behalf felt good, even if I didn't share it. I wasn't sure what I felt toward Maximus. I simply didn't want to think about him at all. You didn't watch the video, Lily, Dad implored. Oh, God, I whispered, realizing what that meant. Dad and Flavio had watched the video. I shot to my feet and ran upstairs. Stumbling through my open door, I flung myself onto my bed. I shivered, and my eyes burned fiercely, but the tears didn't fall. I felt like crying, but I couldn't. I felt like I might throw up, though. Steps made the wooden floorboards creak. I knew it was Dad without looking over my shoulder. He smelled like the aftershave I associated with him and a hint of gunpowder. The mattress dipped. I'm sorry, Sara. Part of me wants to kill Maximus, but... It's not that, I whispered. I didn't want you to watch. Dad was silent. Even though I didn't want to, I looked up. His face was full of anguish. I reached for his hand resting on his knee. You shouldn't be the one consoling me, Sara. He wrapped his fingers around my hand and squeezed. That's my job. His soft gaze was worried, a typical Dad expression. I'd expected a different expression after he'd watched the video, but he still looked at me like he'd always done. To him, I was still the Sara from this morning. But I could tell. She was already gone. My sister's chatter woke me. I sat up slowly in my bed, wincing at the soreness between my legs. I still felt sluggish. Last night had been the first time I'd ever taken something to help me sleep. Despite being scared of possible nightmares, I'd been even more desperate for the day to end. The effects of the sleeping pills still seemed to have a hold on my body. With a deep breath, I forced myself to get up. Mornings meant new beginnings, a chance for something good to happen. That had always been a firm belief of mine, and I wouldn't allow anything to change that. I got dressed in comfortable loungewear. It was the weekend, so I didn't have any classes. Still, I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept until almost noon. I wasn't a partygoer, so I usually woke up early. Following my sisters fighting, I left my room and found them in Inessa's room. Inessa was 7 years, and Alea was 9 years younger than me. They argued all the time. I leaned against the doorframe of their shared room and watched them as they argued over a broken hairband. They both had inherited Mom's dark blonde hair, but where Inessa's eyes were blue, Alea's were brown, like mine. Alea was the first one to notice me. She fell silent, soon followed by Inessa, who stopped mid-sentence. "Sara!" Alea shouted and rushed toward me. The air left my lungs when she collided with my belly. I hugged her with a small smile. Inessa joined us and hugged me too. She looked at my face. "Are you hurt?" I'd asked my parents to keep the details of my captivity from them. They were too young to understand. I could only hope nobody told them about the video. My belly did a flip, and for a moment I was sure I'd throw up. "I'm okay," I said. I needed them to believe it so I could start believing it too. "We were so scared," Alea exclaimed. I nodded. I'd never understood the true meaning of fear, of stark, body-numbing fear, until yesterday. I prayed my sisters would never experience it. "Where's Mom?" "Cooking," Inessa said. I should probably consider eating something, as I hadn't had anything in 24 hours. I wasn't sure my stomach was ready for anything, though. I headed to the kitchen where Mom was busy preparing minestrone for lunch. The kitchen smelled of the intense vegetable and Parmesan broth. I drew in a deep breath, letting happy memories from the past flood me. I had so many wonderful memories. I just needed to make sure they would beat the one dark one I'd added to the list yesterday. "Sara's finally up," Alea announced as she and Inessa entered the kitchen after me. Mom whirled around, her eyes locking on me. The concern in her eyes was so strong, I was sure even Alea and Inessa couldn't miss it. "Are you hungry?" I shook my head. My belly still felt as if I was in a boat during a heavy storm. "You should eat," Mom encouraged gently. The plea in her voice finally won me over. I could only imagine how much she worried about me. I didn't want to give her another reason. "How can I resist your minestrone?" I took a seat at the wooden table. Most days we had breakfast and lunch in our big kitchen. We only ate dinner in the living room when Dad and Flavio joined us. Inessa, Alea, and Mom joined me at the table, and we dug in. Despite my nausea, I forced a few spoons of soup down. It tasted as delicious as always, but I simply couldn't eat more. I leaned back and enjoyed Alea and Inessa's bickering. Those two loved each other dearly, but not a day passed when they didn't fight. A message lit up Mom's phone from where it rested on the table beside her bowl of soup. She usually didn't allow phones at the table. Maybe Dad and Flavio were sending her updates. The screen lit up again, just when Mom pulled it away from the table, obviously to hide it from me. Too late. Paolo's father. Oh, God. I hadn't thought about Paolo at all since my conversation with Mom in the car. Paolo, my fiancé. The man I was supposed to marry in 2 months, in a wedding our mothers had planned for over a year. Mom gave me a tight smile. Did she really think I hadn't seen who had written her? "They know?" Mom nodded. "They were just asking how you feel." If that were the case, why did Mom hide her phone the moment she saw who it was? I wasn't sure where my phone was. Had it been destroyed during the crash? Or had the Russians destroyed it to avoid it being tracked? "Where's my phone?" Mom got up and took it from the kitchen counter. The screen had a crack, but when I turned it on, it worked as always. Soon, messages started flooding in. "We messaged you last night. We didn't know you didn't have your phone," Inessa said, looking up from her bowl, her spoon an inch from her lips. I scanned my messenger. There were messages from my sisters, Valerio, Gianna, Aria, Marcella, and Isabella. Not one from Paolo. If he and his parents wanted to inquire about my health, he could have messaged me. I opened Issa's message first. If you want to talk, I'm in the gym operating the counter today. It'll be boring as hell. Many hugs. Issa and I were cousins and liked each other, but we were different. She was 3 years younger than me, so we'd never hung out together. She, Flavio, and Valerio had always been inseparable, and I didn't want to meddle with their bond. Issa had been kidnapped 3 months ago. She'd never talked to me about the incident, and I had never dared to ask. Maybe it was time to change that. I opened the other messages, but they all basically told me the same. There isn't a message from Paolo, I said, disappointed. Mom put her spoon down, and her smile became even tighter. Maybe he wants to give you some space. Maybe. I could tell that Mom was keeping something from me. I didn't want to think about Paolo and my wedding right now. Part of me felt guilty, almost as if I had any say in what had happened. On an intellectual level, I knew that was nonsense, but that didn't change what I felt. I would like to see Issa in the gym today. She invited me over. Mom's eyes widened in shock. She got up and picked up our bowls. I immediately helped her while Inessa and Alea wiped the table and loaded the dishwasher. Do you think it's a good idea to go out yet? I won't hide. You shouldn't hide, but... Mom leaned against the kitchen counter, the dish towel clutched in her hands as she watched me with furrowed brows. You seem so... composed. I'm worried you're trying to be strong for our sake. The last she whispered so Alea and Inessa, who were singing a song from Taylor Swift at the top of their lungs, couldn't hear her. Would you prefer if I broke down and cried? I swallowed hard because I could feel a storm brewing deep inside me, and I was terrified of the destruction it might cause if unleashed. I wanted my old life. I wanted normalcy. I never broke down. I was never overly emotional. I was reliable and calm. Maybe it came with being the eldest child. When Mom had struggled after giving birth to Alea, I had taken over responsibilities. Even when things had become easier after a few months, I had just never stopped being a sort of shadow parent. Mom touched my shoulder. Of course not. I'm just worried about you. I know, Mom. But life has to go on. Mom's eyes glistened, but she nodded resolutely and picked up her phone. I'll see if your father or Flavio have time to take you there. I'm sure it'll do you good to talk to Issa. 30 minutes later, Dad and Matteo picked me up. I was surprised to see my uncle. Your mom said you are determined to see Issa in the gym. Are you well enough to go out? Dad asked as he held the door to the black limousine open for me while Matteo sat in the driver's seat. I'm not injured, I said. The abrasions were hardly worth mentioning, and the soreness was better by now. Dad wasn't referring to physical scars, though. The 2 showers I'd taken this morning had definitely helped a lot, not only with the soreness, but also with the icky feeling. I got into the back seat. Matteo smiled at me. I didn't expect you, I told him. It's been a while since I visited Gianna in the gym. Today's a good day to change that, he said after a searching look at my face. Dad sat down in the back seat with me. I gave him a curious look, but he only smiled. Did they think I didn't know what was going on? They were upping my protection. I'd seen Marcella and Isabella lose many freedoms after they became victims of our world. I tried not to think about the fact that Matteo had probably seen the video of me too. If I wanted to live my life, I needed to forget about that. When we stepped into the Famiglia gym, my cousin Issa was indeed behind the reception desk, but she was immersed in a book propped up against the computer screen. Issa's mother, my Aunt Gianna, owned the gym. Through the glass wall on the right, I could see her giving a yoga course to 6 women, all of them familiar faces. Your vigilance is lacking, Matteo said to Issa as he approached her and pressed a kiss to her temple. She made a face. Oh, please, guards are everywhere. Her eyes moved past her father to me. She didn't smile, for which I was oddly grateful. I didn't really feel like pretend smiling either. Her glasses were propped up on top of her head, hugging the messy bun in which her maroon hair was put up. She reminded me a lot of my Aunt Gianna.
"I'll sit here while you chat,"
Dad said as he sank down on one of the chairs in the small waiting area.
"I'll take over the reception,"
Mateo said. The gym area with the machines was on the left, and several women working out there kept throwing curious looks our way. "This is a women's gym. Our customers won't feel comfortable if men are everywhere," Isa said. Mateo sank down in the chair behind the counter and propped up his feet on a second chair.
"They'll be fine."
"Mom won't be happy," Isa said with a small shrug as she motioned me toward her. Everyone's eyes seemed to be on me by now. I cringed and followed Isa into the office. She still carried the book that she'd been reading. She pointed at the plush sofa. "Get comfy." Then she walked toward an old-fashioned coffee maker where everything still had to be done by hand. "Espresso?" I shook my head and plopped down on the sofa, sinking into the soft cushions. "Too strong for me. I prefer tea. I live off caffeine. I'm trying to channel my inner Stephen King without resorting to taking heroin or booze." She prepared an espresso. The rattling and whizzing of the machine filled the room, and I decided I quite liked the sound. Isa was focused on preparing her espresso, so I got the chance to watch her closely. Her own kidnapping had been 3 months ago after Amo's wedding. From what I knew, neither she nor her mother had been hurt seriously during the incident, but I still noticed changes in Isa whenever I saw her. She was even more serious and withdrawn than before, always immersed in a book or scribbling on a notepad. She headed over to me with her espresso cup and a bottle of water. I realized she wasn't wearing shoes, only oversized wool socks she'd pulled up to her knees. One was pink, the other purple, and the only dash of color in her otherwise black outfit of leggings, pinafore dress, and turtleneck shirt. She held out the water bottle. I took it but didn't drink. Isa sank down beside me and took a sip from her espresso. "Did you know Stephen King wrote The Shining while under the influence of alcohol and heroin? And he doesn't even remember writing Cujo." "I hope you're not thinking about trying the same," I said. "But considering the disturbing nature of many of his books, I'm not surprised. Not that I had read many of them. I didn't have the stomach for them. And now that my own life had been touched by darkness in this life-altering way, even less." Isa made a shocked face. "Disturbing, but genius. And if you don't like disturbing books, you shouldn't read mine." "You wrote a book?" Isa flushed and took another sip from her espresso, which meant the cup was already empty. I never understood the need for an espresso. I liked drinks that lasted. Nothing was better than hugging a big mug of tea in my palms and feeling it slowly grow colder as I inhaled the comforting scent. "I'm mostly working on short stories and novellas, but I'm also working on a book, yes." "Wow." I searched her face. "Do you use it to work through what happened?" Isa put down the tiny cup and leaned back against the armrest, pulling one of her legs against her chest. She looked straight into my eyes. I could tell she was weighing how much to share. I doubted she was someone who talked about things that bothered her with many people, if at all. "My writing has become more jaded and darker. It's also gotten better. I read somewhere that great writers are born from trauma. Not sure it's true, but writing has definitely become an outlet." She blew a few strands of her maroon hair out of her face. Her messy bun barely contained her wild mane anymore. "Do you want to talk about it?" I was torn. I had come here to talk to Isa, but I was also terrified of how putting my fears into words would make them more real. Last night's nightmare about our capturer's leering face had shaken me up. "I'm worried about how yesterday will shape me and the future. I don't want one bad thing to determine everything else. I don't want to give them the power. But some things are out of my control, and it really scares me." Isa nodded. She tilted her head. "What's out of your control? Are you worried you could be kidnapped again?" That wasn't even something I considered yet. I slowly shook my head. Dad would never allow that to happen. My life of going somewhere without bodyguards was definitely over. "I doubt it'll happen again. It's just... I worry about how people will treat me after learning what happened." "You can't change people. Some of them will always talk shit. They like to gossip. You are a survivor, so don't mind these idiots. Karma will pay them back. I let out a small laugh, but I quickly sobered up again. You know that some people always blame us when things like that happen. You mean being sexually assaulted? I swallowed. Even just giving it a name made my stomach plummet. Yeah, she sighed. We women always get screwed over. She sank her teeth into her lower lip. I know it might seem impossible right now, but eventually, what happened won't be at the forefront of your thoughts anymore. Is it for you? Issa shrugged. It's still there, mainly at night or when I get startled by a noise, but it's better. I'm glad there's war, so I won't have to see any falcones anytime soon. She grimaced. That part will be harder for you. I rarely saw Maximus in the past, and that won't change in the future. And the Russians, I doubt I'll ever see them again. Issa let out a humorless laugh. They'll probably all be dead within a year. Don't worry. I wondered if she wished that upon her kidnappers, upon the unholy trinity. They'd probably not be served justice, whatever that was. Issa and I chatted for a few more minutes about our books before we returned to the lobby. Dad was still on his chair, but Matteo was gone. Gianna was no longer in the yoga room either. Her course was obviously over. My parents are probably arguing somewhere, Issa said with a small shrug as if it was no big deal. I'd never heard my parents argue. I wasn't sure if they simply never fought or were just very good at hiding their arguments from my siblings and me. The door to the gym opened and Cora stepped inside, dressed in gym clothes with her brown hair up in a high ponytail. She was Maximus's mother. She froze in her tracks with wide eyes when she spotted me, and I did the same. Her eyes were blue, not the startling auburn of her son, and I was glad they didn't share many physical features. She was quicker to recover. Her expression became compassionate, and I dreaded what she'd say. Being reminded of Maximus came too soon. I wanted to ban him from my thoughts, but her presence ripped open wounds. I'm so sorry, Sara, she whispered. I know it might be hard to hear, but Maximus is distraught. He didn't want any of this.
Cora,
Dad said in a hard tone as he rose from his chair.
That's enough. Sara doesn't need to hear this now. She's got enough on her plate.
She squared her shoulders. You're looking out for your child, Romero, and I'm looking out for mine. Maximus was a victim in this too. I could see the worry on Cora's face for her son. I wanted to tell her that I understood and didn't want Maximus to feel guilty, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. I just wanted to leave.
It's different,
Matteo, who had entered the scene without my noticing, said.
Maximus is a tough guy. He'll survive.
That's some serious sexism there, Dad, Issa said, crossing her arms. Men can be victims of sexual abuse too.
I'm sure it can be the case, Issa,
Matteo said in a voice that suggested he wasn't convinced. Dad put a hand on my shoulder.
We need to leave now.
I gave a terse nod. My throat was too tight to reply. Talking to Issa had helped me, but what came afterward had opened the can of worms I wanted to keep closed. I didn't want to think about Maximus because that meant reliving the details of what happened. I just couldn't do it now. I wanted to have my old life back, and that wouldn't happen if I broke down. It probably wouldn't happen at all. Chapter 5. Sara.
Paolo wants to talk to you,
Dad said as he stepped into my room after knocking. I had been reading a book on the restoration of medieval paintings for college, even though I wasn't sure when I'd be ready to return to my courses, or when Dad would allow me to go. A week had passed since the kidnapping, and I'd expected my fiancé to contact me sooner. On the other hand, I dreaded how mortifying it would be. I wasn't sure what I felt. Knowing Paolo had probably seen me with Maximus. I knew it wasn't my fault. I had done nothing wrong, yet I felt inexplicably ashamed. I shivered, trying not to let my thoughts take me down that road again. It would make leaving the house and going into public even harder, but I didn't want to hide. Only took him a week. I said with a fake smile.
He contacted me right after, but I didn't think having you deal with him was a good idea.
I nodded. I didn't like that Dad kept things from me, but I understood his need to protect me, especially because I knew he felt guilty. He can come over today if he wants, I said, ignoring the way my pulse picked up and my belly clenched at the thought of meeting him. I hadn't even dared thinking about our upcoming marriage yet, maybe because I wasn't sure if I even still wanted to go through with it. How could things not always be strange between Paolo and me? And if I was really pregnant? The thought made my belly flip, but I shoved it away. I still had a week of not knowing, and fretting over it wouldn't make things easier. The moment Paolo entered our house, I knew there wouldn't be a wedding. He couldn't even look at my face.
"Hey, Sara,"
he said as a way of greeting, his smile awkward and tight. He kept his distance from me. Not that we'd ever exchanged physical contact, but the distance between us had grown in every possible way. Mom and Dad hovered in the background. Dad had made it very clear that he wouldn't allow me to be alone with Paolo today. Not that I wanted privacy. "Hey, Paolo." He looked like he hadn't slept much, with dark circles under his brown eyes, and he appeared even more haggard than usual. He cleared his throat and rubbed his palms over his thighs. Then he sent my parents a tight smile. Paolo didn't want to marry me. I could see it in his face, in his body language. He just didn't know how to tell me without being rude and breaking our world's rules. Though, I supposed seeing your future wife having sex with another man on video, even if she didn't choose to do so, gave Paolo a few loopholes to evade the marriage. I felt sad, but not because I had feelings for him. I had liked him in a platonic way, and hadn't minded a marriage when his parents had asked mine, but my heart had never been in it. I was sad because the future I had always envisioned slowly unraveled before my very eyes. I wouldn't marry this winter and build a beautiful family with 3 kids. I'd be the center of gossip, with a canceled wedding and possibly a child from a man I wasn't married to, born from an act I was trying to forget. Everything I'd always wanted was suddenly out of reach. Most men wouldn't marry me now. And was I really ready for that sort of commitment, for the intimacy it required? "I don't think we should go through with the wedding," I said, making it easier for Paolo and myself. I couldn't bear the awkward silence anymore, and I definitely didn't want to listen to any possible explanation Paolo had come up with. "That's what you came here to say, right?" He looked from my parents to me, then quickly back again as if I caught him doing something indecent. And maybe it was. Perhaps it was cowardly and weak to end an engagement when your fiancé went through what I had, but I couldn't blame him. Even I felt icky about the situation, about myself. Dad's expression darkened as he met Paolo's gaze.
"Is that why you're here?"
Mom came over to me and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I touched her hand in reassurance. "It's fine. It's for the best."
Dad scoffed. "It's dishonorable to break an engagement, especially if your fiancé was hurt. I didn't..."
Paolo trailed off.
"It's just..."
"Don't," I muttered. "Don't say anything. I don't want to hear it. It's over. You're free to move on, and so am I."
"Right."
Paolo shifted from one foot to the other, then gave a resolute nod.
"I'll be gone then. My father will call to make the necessary arrangements for the announcement."
He backed away, briefly paused at the front door as if he wanted to say more. Then he left. In the utter silence that followed, I could practically hear my heart breaking. I didn't feel as if I were free to move on. I carried too much baggage from the past and fear of the future with me. At least now I didn't have to worry about a wedding anymore. Probably never again. I let out a bitter laugh and closed my eyes. After a deep breath, I opened them again, even though I knew the result would be the same. The pregnancy test on the counter didn't leave any room for doubt. It wasn't a slight second line, not one you'd have to look for like some people did in those cutesy pregnancy test videos I used to watch on TikTok. My second line was fat and blue. It was unnecessary to do another test, but I still did. This one was even more blunt. Pregnant. It was as simple as that. I was pregnant. Pregnant from an event I wanted to forget. Pregnant by a man I often resented, even though I knew he didn't have a choice, and I had even given him the okay. An okay that hadn't really been worth much. Pregnant out of wedlock. Oh, the gossip mills would love it. I'd always been someone who preferred the sidelines. I never picked the boldly colored dresses or did anything crazy with my hair. I never laughed too loudly or acted out. I liked being in the shadows. It was where I was comfortable. A place where I could watch other people and admire their bravery to be bold. But I'd been dragged into the spotlight in the worst way possible. And now with this pregnancy and a canceled wedding, there was no way I could escape into the shadows again. They wouldn't let me. As if it was as easy to spot the people who'd condemn me. Nobody would openly point fingers. There would be pity and understanding, not open condemnation. But I knew how things would play out in the end. Some people would say I shouldn't have gone to college. Then I would have been safe. Some would blame it on my clothes or something equally ridiculous. I hated that I felt helpless. I hated that things were once again out of my control. I didn't want to be a bystander when my future was decided. It was my life. I wanted to be the one to choose how it would unfold, even if my options were limited. I still wanted everything I'd once wished for. I looked up from the pregnancy test to my reflection. Maybe the rules were unfair toward women, especially women like myself, but I couldn't change the rules or our world. I could only try to still fit in. For my family's sake, for my sake, and even for the baby's sake. That left me with only one option. It wasn't one I'd ever considered in the past 2 weeks, not really. Now, it was my way of taking the reins back.
Maximus. The sound of a bike's engine raised the hairs at the nape of my neck. When Maddox pulled up in the driveway, I took a deep breath to suppress my body's reaction. I was in fight mode, as if the mere sight of a motorcycle was enough to bring out the murderer in me. I had always hated the bikers. It came with my job, and somehow I hated them even more now. If they hadn't recorded Markella getting hurt, Jabba would have never come up with the idea to hurt Sara. Maddox pulled his helmet off, then smoothed his blonde hair away from his face. He looked like an MC member, even if he wasn't wearing the cut anymore and had been working for the Famiglia for a while. Hell, he was even married to Luca's daughter, Markella, but it didn't make him a made man. The biker was ingrained in him, triggering me like never before. I hadn't been one of the people angry with Luca for allowing him to work for us or be part of our world. I knew people could change and form new loyalties. I wouldn't be here today if Luca hadn't taken a chance on Dad. Maddox regarded me from his spot on his bike as if he knew what I was thinking. He finally dismounted and headed my way. We had worked together on occasion when he'd helped us capture bikers, but this time our encounter felt different, weighed down by feelings that didn't even make sense. He raised his eyebrows. "You look like you want to punch me." He shrugged. "If that helps you get over the shit you've been through, be my guest." He tilted his chin up in invitation. Fuck. I should be grateful for his help. He was good at finding people who didn't want to be found. Bikers, Bratva soldiers, simply everyone. I want to torture and kill. Punching won't even begin to satisfy my need for revenge. I growled. Fuck, I needed to get a grip. It wasn't Maddox's fault. He was here to help. He shoved his hands into his black jeans and stared up into the overcast sky. I regret many things, but I won't ever regret kidnapping Markella. Because if I hadn't made the biggest fucking mistake of my life, she wouldn't be my wife today. And that would be a fucking shame. You're lucky your kidnapping had such a happy ending, I muttered bitterly. Maybe there can be a happy end for you, too. Something snapped inside me, and I grabbed his throat. A happy ending after what I did? Do you think Markella would have become your wife if you had raped her? His fingers closed around my wrist, but he didn't try to pull me away. He stared straight into my eyes. The understanding in them frustrated me even more. I wanted my rage to be met with rage. I wanted a reason to kill the man before me. From what I saw, neither of you had a choice. I released him, grimacing. Had anyone not seen that fucking video? You're here to help me find the men responsible for our capture, not to be the judge over my sins. Only Sara and God can do that. I was brushing my dog Bacon's white fur on my parents' veranda when my phone rang. He let out a yowl when I put down the brush. His short fur didn't require combing, but he loved being petted like that, so I tried to brush him every other night. Despite his upbringing in a puppy mill, he was a very gentle Dogo Argentino. When I saw the name on the screen, my brief sense of calm evaporated. It was Romero. Did he have new information on the Russians? Maddox's and my investigations hadn't come up with their location so far. Can you come over? Romero asked. To your house? I asked, stunned. I'd never been there, and after what had happened, I hadn't expected for that to change. I hadn't seen Sara in the past 2 weeks, nor anyone from her family except for Romero. Flavio avoided me, and so did the women of the family, naturally. Yes, we need to discuss something. Sure. I stood and dusted myself off. I can be there in 40 minutes. Good. Romero hung up. What's up? Primo asked as he came up behind me. He had been stretched out on the swing. Romero wants me to come over to his place. Primo's face reflected my own confusion. We shared the same hair color, but his eyes were our mother's blue. Not as kind, though. Do you think it's a trap? Do you want me to come with you as backup? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I'd been too wrapped up in the thought that I might see Sara again, and fuck, that possibility scared me more than a possible trap. I could deal with torture, but I wasn't sure I could face her. That's not Romero's style. Some things change people. Who was he telling? I wasn't the same person I'd been before. I didn't want to think of how Romero must have felt watching the recording. Fuck. If he changed his mind and wanted to kill me in front of Sara, could I really blame him? Should I even stop him? Don't even think about it, Primo warned. Your death won't change anything. You can't undo it. You did what had to be done. Everyone agrees. I doubt Sara does, I growled. She said it's okay, Max. You killing yourself with guilt won't make a difference. But you killing every Bratva soldier as brutally as you can will. I patted Bacon's head, who'd picked up on my agitation, and pressed himself against my leg. I need to leave now if I want to make it on time in this traffic. You sure you don't want me to come? Primo asked with crossed arms. Absolutely. I got into my truck and drove off. I could see Primo in the rearview mirror with Bacon by his side, watching me leave. I wondered if this was the last time I'd see my brother. Should I have hugged my mom one more time? I shook my head. I turned up the music, drowning out my thoughts. After I'd parked at the curb in front of the Concio home, a brownstone townhouse in Greenwich Village, I stayed seated for a while. It wasn't that I was scared of possible retribution. I blew out a breath and got out, then headed for the door. It opened before I could knock. Flavio stood in the doorway. He was only 17, but in the past 2 weeks since the kidnapping, he'd become a real man. He wasn't as tall as me, very few were, and not as broad, but from the tension in his body, I could tell it wouldn't stop him from a fight. Took you a long time to get out of your car? Romero appeared behind his son and gave me a tight smile. They were the same height and looked remarkably alike, with brown hair, brown eyes, and similar facial features. Maximus, come in. He opened the door wider and gave Flavio a stern look that made him step back so I had room to enter. Should I take my shoes off? I asked. My boots would probably leave marks on the beige carpet. Liliana would rip your head off if you didn't, Romero said with a tight smile. I had a feeling she would do it with or without shoes. I slipped out of my shoes and left them on a mat by the door. It felt strange being inside their home, as if I were intruding even though they'd asked me to come. Steps sounded upstairs. Then Liliana rushed down the wooden staircase and stormed my way. She slapped me hard. I didn't move, waiting for more of her anger to manifest in violence. But she simply breathed harshly, glaring at my chest. Sara shared similar facial features to her mother, and just that reminder was enough to make me take whatever violence she wanted to unleash. She was a petite woman, but her slap would have made even some men take notice. "I shouldn't have done it," she whispered, her voice shaky. "No, I understand." I had expected something like this when Sara's family had asked to see me. Romero came up behind his wife and placed his hands on her shoulders. She visibly relaxed under his touch. He gave me a nod. "Let's go to the dining room." He steered his wife toward the door to our right. I followed them into the cozy dining room. Candles cast a warm light on their surroundings, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the room. A large bouquet of wild flowers on the rustic wooden table explained why my nose picked up the floral note. It wasn't a room used for representation. It was a room where a family lived. I felt reminded of home, even if I knew I wasn't really welcome here. I wasn't sure why they wanted to see me. I hovered in the middle of the room, not sure if they wanted me to sit down. Flavio entered the room. He had more trouble looking at me without accusation. His father hid his feelings better if he had them. Romero motioned at one of the chairs. I sank down and stared at the quote across from me on the wall. "Happiness is homemade." I waited for the others to sit as well, but instead they exchanged looks. Romero let out a quiet sigh. "The past few weeks have been difficult for our family. In particular for Sara, of course. Yesterday we got news that added to this." Liliana met my gaze. She folded her hands, her knuckles turning white. Whatever the news, it was horrible. "Sara is pregnant." I froze. It took me several moments to realize why they were telling me this. I was the father. Sara was pregnant because of what had happened between us. Because of what I'd done. I doubted I'd come, but I had been so deeply in my head, in my fantasy, trying to use the hypnosis techniques I'd learned, that I couldn't 100% be sure. I didn't say anything. My thoughts were a jumbled mess. Liliana and Romero exchanged a look that spoke of shared trust and wordless understanding. One I sometimes witnessed between my parents and had always admired. "Sara canceled the wedding with Paolo. She didn't want to bring a child into their marriage," Liliana continued. The timbre of her voice shifted for the second sentence, telling me it wasn't the truth. "And he didn't want me anymore." My eyes darted to Sara, who hovered in the doorway. She wore jeans and a sweater that hid her belly. Not that there would be a belly at this point, but I still couldn't stop staring. "That's not what he said," her mother said gently. In the past 2 weeks, I had waited for Paolo to confront me in some way. If someone had hurt my fiancé, I would have gone to him and probably killed him. Sara let out a sigh. "Not in those words, but his eyes said it all. I don't want someone to marry me out of pity." She slowly came into the room, looking exhausted and pale, with dark circles under her big eyes. I had trouble keeping up with all the revelations, but my instincts told me what to do. "I want to take responsibility and help you raise the child. I realize it's not something you'll want, but we could marry to give the baby a family." Sara's expression made me feel like an idiot. How could I suggest she marry me after what I'd done? I cleared my throat and got up. "I earn enough money to provide for you and the child without a marriage." "I don't want a marriage out of pity," she said quietly. She avoided looking at my face, her gaze always hovering somewhere on my throat. "I don't feel pity. It was mostly true. I usually didn't feel pity, and my feelings towards Sara were dominated by burning hot guilt. "I can attest to his pitiless nature," Flavio said bitterly. My stomach tightened, but my face remained impassive. I knew what I was and what my talents were. "We discussed this with Sara, and she thinks a marriage between you and her would be the best solution in this difficult situation," Romero said. His tight tone told me he didn't agree. I searched Sara's face. It was controlled, but her eyes brimmed with hurt. I hadn't considered getting married any time soon, much less becoming a father. But I had to redeem myself however I could. Under different circumstances, marrying a beautiful and respected woman like Sara would have been a jackpot. Now, our marriage would be a constant reminder of my sin, which was exactly what I deserved. "I'll do whatever you think is best for you and the baby, Sara."
"I don't know what's best. I don't even want this baby. I mean—"
Despair filled her face. She shook her head, self-hatred twisting her features. Whatever she felt was valid. I wished I had the words to tell her that, but I wasn't a talker.
"Excuse me."
She turned on her heel and left. I got it. Carrying my child must be hard for her, a constant reminder of what happened. I admired her strength and dreaded how much more of it she would have to gather to get through a pregnancy and years of raising the child.
"She wants to keep it. It's just a lot to take in,"
Liliana explained. Then she followed her daughter. I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to go after her, but knew my presence was unwelcome. Sara didn't need my consolation. "What do you have in mind? What next?" I asked instead. "Everything is planned for Sara's wedding to Paolo in 6 weeks. We would like to keep the date. And just switch the groom," I said. Romero nodded. "It's not ideal. Fuck, it's a shit show. Everything that has happened. But if this helps Sara, I'll even wear Paolo's suit. I don't care. My feelings won't be hurt by this."
"Paolo's suit would be 3 sizes too small for you,"
Flavio muttered. "Many people know what happened, even though Luca made it very clear that he disapproves of gossip making the rounds," Romero said. "People will gossip no matter what. Eventually they'll move on," I said. "I'll shut up whoever I overhear saying something." "Good. I realize I'm not the son-in-law you wanted, but I'll do everything I can to be a good husband for Sara." Flavio scoffed, but didn't say anything. Did he think I didn't know I was the wrong man for Sara for more reasons than I cared to admit? "It's not you. It's about circumstances." Romero approached me and touched my shoulder, surprising me with the move. "I think Sara wants to protect her honor and the unborn child. She doesn't really want a husband." I smiled bitterly. "I know this marriage will be on paper only. I don't expect Sara to act like a wife." If Romero worried that I might want to consummate the marriage, he didn't need to. I would never touch Sara again unless she wanted me to, and the chances of that happening were nil. "That's good. We should make the announcement as soon as possible. Let me talk to my parents first, so they won't find out through the gossip mill, and then you can pick a time and place where you want to announce it." I left without talking to Sara again. Everything felt surreal. My life had turned upside down. I needed to talk to someone. Primo had left for a mission soon after I'd left home, and this wasn't a topic I wanted to discuss over the phone. I considered going to Amo, but he had a lot on his plate with Cressida. When I pulled up the driveway to my parents' house, I felt a sense of relief. I parked in the driveway and was immediately greeted by Bacon. He was almost deaf, a fate many white dogs shared. When I had to work too much, my parents took care of him, and I never took him into the city with me. I rarely slept there anyway, And if I did, I slept in one of the rooms the Famiglia had for soldiers from out of town. What would happen now that I was going to marry Sara? I would have to look for a place for us, but I wasn't sure if I could take Bacon with me. He needed company, and here, he always had plenty. After I'd petted him and the 4 dogs belonging to my parents that were allowed to roam free, I walked toward the front door. Mom was already waiting in the doorway. She was in gym clothes, and her sweaty hair was in a messy bun atop her head. The moment she saw my face, she came out to meet me. She touched my cheek and tilted her head back to look at me.
What happened?
I'm fine, I said automatically. I didn't want her to worry about me. I could take care of myself. Only hungry. I walked inside, followed by Mom. She still regarded me with worry as she put everything for a sandwich on the table. I sat on the bench and grabbed 2 slices of bread. She watched me prepare and eat 2 BLTs in silence, but never took her eyes off me as she leaned against the kitchen island. I'll marry Sara, I said after I'd taken a swig of water. Mom's eyes widened, and she sank down on the chair across from me.
That's why they wanted to see you?
They didn't talk me into marriage. I was the one who suggested it when I found out that Sara is pregnant. Mom leaned back in her chair. Her lips parted, but no words left her mouth for at least a minute.
Okay,
she blinked.
Wow. That's not what I expected.
She pushed to her feet and began pacing the kitchen, rubbing her forehead as if she could feel a headache coming.
This is a lot to take in for the both of you. How is Sara handling it?
I didn't get the chance to talk to her alone, but she's... I blew out of breath, not sure what to say. Mom nodded.
And you?
The compassion in her eyes annoyed me. I wasn't the victim here. I'm doing whatever's necessary to make up for my sin.
Max.
I raised my palm. Don't. You're my mother. You'd find an excuse for every crime that I'd commit.
No, I would not,
she seethed, her eyes flashing with anger.
But you and Sara were both victims in this.
I got up, frustrated. I'm not the victim. I wasn't hurt.
Yes, you were. You were forced to do something sexual you didn't want to do. You're a victim.
Was she blind to the fucking truth? I'm not a fucking victim, so stop calling me one. I'm a fucking rapist. Mom blanched.
You're not. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And you're not stupid, Maximus, so stop saying it. I'm sure if you talk to Sara, you'll see that she doesn't see you that way.
She can't even look at me.
That doesn't mean she blames you. She has a lot to deal with.
I don't want to discuss this anymore. I'm marrying her in 6 weeks, so that's what I need to focus on. I hadn't slept all night. My life had taken a drastic U-turn in the past few weeks. Suddenly I was engaged, soon to be married, and a father. Fuck. I still lived at home. My parents' house was big enough, and that way, I'd always been able to help with the shelter. Now that I was going to marry, I needed my own place. I needed a place for a family. I knew of a few Famiglia-owned apartments on the market, but I'd always dreamed about living in a house outside of the city like my parents did. What did Sara want? I hardly knew anything about her. If we'd been promised in the usual fashion, I would have asked her what she wanted. But talking to her wasn't as easy as that. But I needed to act quickly. The wedding was soon. That didn't leave much time for my house hunt. When I came down to the kitchen, Mom, Dad, and Primo were gathered around the table. War Council? I asked sarcastically. One look at their faces told me they'd been talking about me. You're jumping in for the discarded groom, Primo asked. Not your problem. He meant well. For some reason he seemed to think he needed to protect me. I wasn't the victim here. It's the best solution for a very shitty situation. Primo shrugged. I'm sure it's meant to keep the waves of gossip down. But a move like that will create a tsunami.
We'll deal with it,
Dad said firmly. Mom motioned to the breakfast casserole on the table.
Soon, things will calm down.
I need to find a place for Sara and me, and the baby once it's born. Mom nodded solemnly.
I know. Have you talked to Sara about it?
Not yet. There wasn't much time last night. I wondered how to approach the matter. I dreaded how awkward things would be between us once we lived together. I'd give Sara as much room as she needed, but we'd still live under the same roof. People would gossip even worse if we didn't. I didn't really give a damn about anyone's opinion, but Sara obviously did. I should buy her a ring. She can't wear her old engagement ring anymore, I said.
Do you want me to help you pick one?
Mom asked, her face alight with hope. She'd probably hoped she could help me organize my wedding, but Paolo's mother and Liliana had already done so. I don't know what Sara likes. Do you? Mom bit her lip.
I can ask Gianna. She knows her better than me. That okay for you?
You think Gianna knows about this already? Primo asked doubtfully.
Romero didn't make this decision without discussing it with Luca. And if Luca knows, Aria knows, and then Gianna knows.
Mom said with an amused look. Dad gave a silent nod. Your mom has great taste. Let her help you. I know and I will, I said, more to make Mom happy. Mom immediately called Gianna, who suggested we take Isabella with us. I wasn't sure how close Isabella and Sara were. Were they best friends? I always thought Valerio, Flavio, and Isabella were close, which didn't really make me feel more at ease. Flavio had probably shared his dislike of me with his friends. I never had a problem with people disliking me. Many of the things I did on a daily basis made me unlikable, but the reason for Flavio's dislike wasn't something I was proud of. Mom and I picked up Isabella at their apartment building in the early afternoon. Isabella gave me a brief smile before she climbed into the back seat. It had seemed honest. We headed toward the jeweler that Isabella suggested. Apparently it was the jeweler Aria, Gianna, and Liliana got their jewelry from, which meant I'd have to use a huge chunk of the money I'd intended to use for buying a house. I earned good money as an enforcer, especially if I did the occasional contract killing. But I'd enjoyed life as a single person without too much thought of the future. If I'd known I'd marry this soon, I would have put more money aside. Mom and Isabella immediately began to scan the displays in the shop while I stood somewhat lost in the center. The only time I'd been at a jeweler was when I'd bought myself my dream watch, a Rolex Submariner.
This looks beautiful.
Mom gushed as she pointed at something in the glass cabinet in front of her. Isabella joined her and perused the display. She nodded thoughtfully.
Sara doesn't like anything too obvious.
I finally joined them. The jeweler took out 3 pieces that both my mom and Isabella agreed on. Isabella leveled a serious gaze on me.
I think it's good that you're showing Sara you want to make an effort. I don't think she expects you to give her a ring. It's a great gesture, but things will still be hard. Nothing about this is ideal.
I gave her a sardonic smile. Oh, I know. I know nothing about this will be easy, and I know it won't be a normal marriage. I wondered what Sara had told her. Isabella didn't seem to hate me, so Sara couldn't have said too much. Chapter 6. Maximus. When I tried to contact Sara to ask her about a meeting under the pretense of having to discuss our future living arrangements, which was only one reason, I realized I didn't even have her number. And why the fuck would I have it? We had been distant acquaintances until the damn Russians had turned our lives upside down and turned me into something I'd never wanted to be. Sara and I still were mere acquaintances, only now with a dark past and a difficult future. Fuck it. I contacted Romero, and after I told him the real reason I wanted to see his daughter, he actually gave me her number. I'd expected that he'd make the arrangements for me. I stared down at my phone, not sure how to begin a message to Sara. Everything I phrased in my head sounded either creepy, too formal, or like a fucking sap. "Get a grip, man," I muttered and slapped my thighs. "You can do it." Bacon raised his head from his paws, tilted his head to the side, and gave me his concerned dog stare. "Hey, Sara." It was sad how long it took me to settle for this greeting. "This is Maximus." I almost added Trevisan, but given our past and the lack of other people with that name in our circles, it would have made me look like more of a fool. "Your father gave me your number. To show her I had permission. Can we meet at your home to discuss where we'll live after our wedding?" "Thanks." This one was the hardest. Any kind of affectionate ending was out of the question, but I could hardly write kind regards or something equally fucked up. Maximus. I sent it off and got up, waving Bacon over. "Come on, boy. Let's go on a walk." I needed to clear my head and not spend the next hours looking at my phone. Maybe Sara was too shocked by a direct message from me to reply right away. We crossed the driveway on our way to our favorite trail through the woods, which began right behind my parents' house. My phone beeped, stalling me in my tracks. It was a message from Sara. "Of course. You can come over this afternoon at 4 if you have time." "I do. See you then." I glanced at my watch. It was noon. I was sweaty from working in the shelter all morning. The drive into the city in the afternoon would take me about an hour, so I'd have to cut my walk short to get ready. I arrived at the Concio home with 5 minutes to spare. I stuffed the small velvet box with the engagement ring into my pants pocket. I'd chosen khaki-colored chinos and a dress shirt to look put together. Handing over a ring wasn't something I wanted to do in a tee and jeans. Liliana opened the door for me. This time Sara's younger sisters were present too. They eyed me curiously when I stepped in. I wasn't sure how much they knew, but given their age and their friendly attitude, probably not much. Like all the Concio daughters, they had inherited Liliana's beauty. Sara came down the staircase shortly after my arrival. She was dressed in dark jeans and a very soft-looking cream-colored sweater. Her hair was up in a high ponytail, and she wasn't wearing any makeup, so the dark rings under her eyes were very prominent. My stomach tightened. She gave me a tight smile as she stopped at the base of the stairs, then tugged a knot there strand behind her ear.
"Hi."
"Hi, Sara."
"Would you like to go into the living room?"
Liliana asked. Sara nodded, and I motioned the women to go ahead. They did. I didn't see Romero or Flavio anywhere, but I couldn't imagine that they left their women unprotected. Sara took a seat on one of the plush armchairs. I was glad. If she'd chosen the sofa, I would have wondered if I should sit beside her. This way, she didn't give me the option. I sank down on the armchair beside hers. Her sisters quickly perched on the sofa, looking excited.
"Inessa, Alea,"
Liliana said sternly.
"I'm sure Sara and Maximus want some privacy."
She looked at us. I looked at Sara. That was her decision, not mine. Sara gave a slight nod.
"We'll be in the kitchen if you need anything,"
Liliana said.
"But, Mom, we want to get to know the man Sara marries,"
the older one complained, pouting. Liliana's stern expression didn't change her petulant attitude.
"Inessa,"
Sara said in a voice that reminded me of my mother's when she'd given Primo and me a lecture as children.
"you'll have enough time to get to know him. Now you need to leave."
Inessa stood with a deep sigh. Then they all disappeared. Sara would be a good mother if she could ever get over the fact that the kid was mine. Silence cloaked the room, and I had to resist the urge to open the top buttons of my shirt because it felt like the thing was trying to strangle me. "Listen," I began in a quiet voice. The natural roughness and depth of my voice attracted many women, but it also carried an air of dominance and brutality, so I tried to soften it for Sara's benefit. "I'm not like that. Like what happened. You don't have to worry. You're safe." Sarah's face turned red, and she avoided my eyes.
I know. We don't need to talk about what happened. It's over.
Her voice was clipped. I nodded. Fuck. I had absolutely no wish to talk about it, but I just wanted to reassure her. She would never have reason to fear me, even if she probably did after what happened. She cleared her throat, and so did I.
You,
she began. I shut up. She motioned for me to go on. I came here to talk about our future home with you. I needed a bit more time to gather my courage to give her the ring. I wasn't sure why I was acting like a goddamn pussy around Sara. That wasn't me. She looked at me.
You live with your parents, right?
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry you'll have to move out because of me.
I frowned. You'll have to move out of your parents' house, too.
I know, but I had plenty of time to prepare. This wedding was set a long time ago, but this is new for you.
I'll be fine. The way to work is too long anyway. A city apartment will be better.
Oh, sure. You don't want a house?
To be honest, I don't think there's enough time to find a house. Less than 6 weeks is not much time unless you're ready to spend $30 million, which I would do if I had it. She gave me a small, understanding smile.
It's not much time, yes. So you think it's enough time to find an apartment?
I know a few Famiglia apartments are on the market, so I was thinking we could take one of them for now. We can still find a better place later, when the baby's born. She looked down at her still flat belly and gave a small nod.
That sounds reasonable. You're actually more reasonable than I'd expected.
Her admittance stunned me. Why? Why wouldn't I be able to make reasonable decisions? Sara looked seriously embarrassed.
I didn't mean to offend you. It's just you and Amo have your reputation. With the parties and the girls and...
Her gaze lingered on the tattoos on my hands. I don't look like husband material to you? I asked, mildly amused. She raised her eyes to the ceiling.
I don't know. I'm talking nonsense.
No, you're fine. I was relieved that we'd managed to have a halfway decent conversation. Fuck. I wouldn't have dared to dream that was possible. She lowered her gaze back to my face.
I have one request.
Sure, anything, I said.
I want to live as closely to my parents as possible. So whatever apartment is nearest, I'd like to pick that one.
I hadn't looked at the apartments in detail. There had been 8 on the market. Okay, I don't mind. I can check the addresses and send you the link to the portfolio.
Sounds good.
Silence fell between us. I cleared my throat again. Then after a quick glance at her fingers, which confirmed that she wasn't wearing Paolo's ring anymore, I pulled the box out of my pocket. Sara angled her body my way. So far she'd been sideways. She regarded the box with widened eyes.
Is this?
She raised her eyes to mine. I opened the box, showing her the ring. Should I get on my knees? I wanted to kick my stupid ass. Sara bit her lip, obviously amused.
No, don't. You didn't have to get me a ring. I would have been fine.
You're now engaged to me, and I want people to know. I want you to carry a sign of our engagement to show you that I'm committed.
That's nice.
She held out her hand, palm up. I put the box in her palm. I would have liked to put the ring on her finger, but I assumed her gesture meant she didn't want that. I respected that. She didn't put the ring on right away, and I didn't ask her to, even if I really wanted her to wear it.
Sara, the ring was beautiful. If I was being honest, it was more beautiful than the one Paolo had given me. His had been too big, too obvious, as if he wanted everyone to see how much money he'd spent. Maximus's choice was more subdued and definitely more my style. The diamond was embedded into the yellow gold band. I preferred this style as it was more practical in daily life. I didn't care if it wasn't as expensive as the one Paolo had chosen. I hadn't even expected an engagement ring from him. It wasn't as if we had a standard courtship. Maximus watched me closely as I fumbled with the box in my hand. Maybe he wanted me to put it on right away? I took out the ring and pushed it onto my finger. Surprise washed over me at how perfectly it fit.
Isabella and my mother helped me pick the right one,
Maximus said. Oh, I'll have to thank them.
You should,
he said. And thank you. He waved me off.
I'm glad you like it.
Suddenly something dawned on me. I never thought about changing the wedding bands. Paolo and I picked them out a while back. It had been a difficult process because Paolo wanted a big wedding ring for me too, but eventually I convinced him of a less flashy piece. His choice, however, was quite prominent, not to mention that Maximus's fingers were much bigger.
I'd prefer it if we picked new rings. You will be my wife. I don't want any signs of your previous fiancé on your body.
He snapped his lips shut, his expression tight with regret. It was the first time he was less restrained and showed a possessive streak. Although I appreciated his attempt to appear calm and reserved in my company, I had seen a different side of him when he'd almost ripped the cage out of the ceiling, fueled by rage. I nodded. I was still so wrapped up in my own life, in all the changes I was met with, I hadn't even stopped to think how that would make Maximus feel. I had tried not to think about him at all. Of course, I don't mind. I'm not emotionally attached to the other ring.
Good. So we're picking new rings and a place to call home.
A place to call home. I'd already dreaded moving out when I thought I'd move into Paolo's house that he'd inherited, but now that it meant living under the same roof as Maximus, I was close to panic. I didn't worry that he'd hurt me. I worried how being faced with him every day would allow me to pretend nothing had happened. Soon, you'll have a child who will be another reminder. Could I ever look at him and the child and not think about the past?
Chapter 7. Maximus. The options in Greenwich Village, close to Sara's parents, were limited. There was one place a few blocks from their house, but it was tiny, only 550 square feet with one bedroom. How were we supposed to live there as a family? And even Sara and I alone probably needed more room in another bedroom. It wasn't as if being close to each other would be easy. "This place looks good," Homo said, pointing at another place, but it was too far away. Sara wanted to be able to walk over to her parents', though I'd obviously never allow her to walk alone. Sara wants to be close to her family. I want to give her this sense of safety. She has enough to deal with. Homo leaned back. "It's not Famiglia owned, but there's a place on the same block, even the same street. Here." He turned his laptop around to me. 3-bedroom ensuite, extra bathroom. I fell silent when I saw the price. It's $2.7 million. That was a bit more than I wanted to pay, more than I could afford without borrowing money. I couldn't just walk to the bank. That wasn't how we did it. I'd have to ask Amo or Luca. It felt really icky to ask my best friend. Even if I sold my Rolex, I'd get 15,000 tops. That wouldn't help much. "How much do you need?" Amo asked without missing a beat. I grimaced and began shaking my head. "Don't be stubborn. I have the money, and it's not a gift. Maybe one day you'll have to figure out a way to kill my wife in a very inconspicuous way. That'll be worth many millions." I cocked an eyebrow. He'd said it in jest, but I wasn't sure that there wasn't a bit of truth in his statement. He loathed Cressida and despised her for having to give up the woman he really wanted. Not that I doubted Amo's ability to kill Cressida himself, but it would probably get more messy if he didn't use me. I have about $1 million. That left me with $200,000 for Sara and me to buy furniture and live a little. "Maybe we can convince the owners to go down on the price," Amo said with a smirk. I grinned. We should give it a try. The owners eventually sold it to us for $2 million. Now, I only had to hope that Sara liked the place. It even had a small rooftop garden. It was on the 4th floor of a classic brownstone townhouse. The place was actually furnished, but I wasn't sure if Sara would like the style. The neighborhood wasn't one I would have usually picked. I felt like an alien compared to everyone else, and the fearful glances I got told me people considered me one too, and a dangerous one at that. The people who lived here worked on Wall Street or in a posh law firm. They had PhDs and went to Ivy League colleges. Those people transplanted hearts to save lives. I ripped them out to kill enemies. Sara's parents, too, lived in a townhouse, but they owned the whole place. Not to mention that Romero and Flavio had the ability to look as if they didn't have a long kill list. The moment I bought the place, I called Sara. I hadn't sent her any information before. Since this wasn't a Famiglia place, I didn't want her to like it when there was a, albeit slim, chance of me not getting the place. And I definitely didn't want to admit that I wasn't as rich as Paolo's family. His family was swimming in money. I was working hard and would definitely one day make more than enough money to buy a whole townhouse without threatening the owner. But I was still young and hadn't planned for marriage yet.
You got a place?
Surprise swung in her voice. It's on the same street as your parents' house. It wasn't Famiglia owned, so I had to be quick.
The same street?
The joy in her voice told me I'd made the right decision. Would you like to see it?
I'm not feeling so well right now. Maybe you can send me photos? I'm sure it's great.
Sure, I'll send them right away. Are we still going ring shopping tomorrow?
No, I'm sorry. My morning sickness is too bad, and it's making me feel sick all day. My mother will join you.
All right, have a good day.
You too.
I hung up, trying not to be disappointed. I had absolutely no reason to be. So far, things were still going much better than I'd ever anticipated. Maybe Sara was really sick, or perhaps she simply didn't want to spend so much time with me yet, and both were fucking fine. Fuck, she had to grow a baby inside her despite what she'd gone through. I already had trouble wrapping my mind around the fact that I would be a father soon. I sent her the 24 photos I'd taken today. A few minutes later, she wrote me a text.
It looks great. Let's keep the furniture. We don't need to spend more money.
I looked around the spacious master bedroom with the oak floors, comfortable king bed, windows overlooking the treetops, and the light gray marble ensuite bathroom. I wasn't sure if Sara and I would share this room. I wasn't sure if we should even try in the beginning. There would be enough obstacles for us. The weeks leading up to the wedding weren't filled with anything remotely heartwarming or romantic. The wedding had been planned for a while. My future bride and I didn't have a budding relationship that needed to be honed. She needed space, and I was more than okay with giving it to her. The only thing I occasionally wished for was knowing more about the pregnancy. Would Sara even talk to me if she decided to end the pregnancy despite her previous decision? I sometimes asked Romero how Sara was doing, or even Amo, because he saw her when Sara's family visited his parents. That way I always stayed in the loop. I wasn't even sure how I would feel if Sara decided to get an abortion. I knew I didn't have a right to talk her into any kind of decision after what had happened. I shook my head. I needed to focus. I had a job to do, one that wasn't usually my style, but I talked Primo into letting me handle it. Explosives were usually his area of expertise. He had never been as keen about torture as me. He preferred things with more impact on a grand scheme and less direct contact with people. I read through Primo's instructions once more. I too had learned how to handle explosives, but it had been a while since I'd used them. "Don't fuck up, or Luca will fuck me up," were his last words on the piece of paper he'd handed me this morning. I had no intention of fucking up, not just because I wanted to be the one to get this kill and wreak utter destruction, but also because I didn't want to get my brother, or Amo, who also knew, in trouble. I got out of my pickup and approached the back entrance of the building. The neon sign on the front declared it a brew house, which it was by day in its public areas. But at night, and in the spacious basement, Jabba's little brother had a laboratory for designer drugs. I wasn't supposed to go in. I wasn't supposed to talk to anyone, especially not Carol. His wife had told us everything there was to know. She was the brain in their marriage, even if Carol masqueraded as the one who led the business. Luckily, she had sung like a canary at the mere threat of torture. She had no loyalty to her husband or the Bratva. Her loyalties lay with Louis Vuitton and Prada, and whoever guaranteed that standard of living. She was dead now. I peered through one of the windows into the inside. Wooden casks were used as tables, and an array of beer cans and bottles were displayed on shelves on the walls. I broke the door and moved into the deserted inside of the brewery. No flights of beer and loaded nachos were being served now. I wasn't sure if a silent alarm had been set in motion, but even if it had, there was only one exit out of the basement. I prepared the explosives and set a timer to 5 minutes. Maybe reinforcement would be here by the time the bomb exploded, and even more Bratva assholes would die. I was supposed to leave right away. Instead, I watched the flap door behind the bar for signs of movement. I wanted to make sure Carol was really inside. The flap door lifted, and a head poked through. Not Carol. "This place will blow up in a couple of minutes. Send me Carol, and I might let you leave." The head disappeared, and almost a minute later, Carol left the flap door. He wasn't as meaty as his older brother, but they shared the same Jabba likeness nonetheless. He cursed in Russian, something very nasty about my mother. The timer was at 2 minutes. "My brother should have fucked your future wife, too," Carol said. I pulled my knife and aimed it at his loin. The blade hit its mark, and Carol sank to his knees with a satisfying howl. Matteo had taught me how to throw knives, and Dad how to throw axes. Almo and I had often practiced throwing axes for fun. Throwing a knife came in more handy on the job, though. 90 seconds. I pulled the jawbone of Jabba's favorite cousin from the pocket of my leather jacket and walked toward Carol's writhing form. I had carved XO Max into the bone after I tortured the guy to death last week. I wouldn't get to be as thorough this time, nor could I wait for Carol's death. I knelt beside him, put the jawbone down beside his shaking form, enjoying his horrified expression. Then I rammed my knife into his back in a way that immobilized him, so I could carve an M into his still flesh-covered jaw. My eyes sought the timer. 20 seconds. Fuck. I shoved to my feet and whirled around, then raced toward the exit. I'd hate to die because I carved my initials into Carol's ugly face. I'd hate it even more for Jabba to find my dead body. He was supposed to find the bodies of his family members until the disgusting rat finally emerged from the gutter. Primo would definitely kill me if he found out I didn't follow his instructions. I was halfway to my pickup when the blast of the explosion hit me and tossed me to the ground. My ears rang, and the scent of burnt hair and flesh told me I had been a bit too close to the explosion than Primo would consider safe. I sat up with a groan at the intense pain in my back and neck. The building was up in flames, and debris littered the street. A dent in the hood of my truck indicated I should have parked down the street where Primo had suggested. But he wanted to be professional. I wanted to get revenge. Who the fuck cared if I burned myself? Not I, that was for sure. I pushed to my feet despite the static in my ears and got in my car. In the distance I could hear sirens. Soon this place would swarm with police, paramedics, and firefighters. I sat straight as I drove home, not wanting to lean against the backrest. It felt as if part of my t-shirt had melted into my skin, and I didn't want to make it worse by putting pressure on the burns. I almost passed out twice on my way back home. When I got out of the car, I had to steady myself against the door. Primo stepped out on the porch and shook his head with a look of exasperation. He stalked toward me and helped me inside the house. I gritted my teeth when his arm pressed against the burns on my back. He set me down in the kitchen and returned with a first aid kit shortly after. "How badly did you fuck up?" "I didn't fuck up. I blew up the brewery, and Carol is dead." "I'm sure that's the whole story." He dumped what felt like a whole bottle of disinfectant over my back, making me groan in pain. "It won't be pretty getting the fabric out of your wounds. You better bite down on something. Give me a bottle of moonshine." He handed me the strongest liquor we had, and I downed a considerable amount. Then I gave a nod to show Primo I was ready. It still hurt like hell, like being skinned alive, which was kind of the case, considering part of my upper skin had become one with my shirt. "Most of them are second-degree burns. The fabric in the wounds is the main problem. Your neck looks the worst. Could be 3rd degree. You should go to the doc tomorrow. He's obligated to tell Luca about this. Then take Alma with you. Nobody will ask questions then. That was true. I simply didn't like using my best friend's power for my own advantage. But in this case, I might have to make an exception. I needed to get the visible burns on my neck treated before the wedding. I wondered if Sara would be happy if she knew I was getting revenge, that I was killing the people Jabba cared about. I wasn't sure how much of our quest for revenge Romero shared with her. Maybe it was best if she didn't know too much, especially not the gory details.
Sara. I wore the wedding dress I'd picked out a year ago. The flowers and food were the ones Paolo's and my mother had picked. Everything was exactly how I'd planned it in the past 18 months. Everything except for the groom and the new wedding ring Maximus would later slide on my finger. That and the baby in my womb. Today I would marry Maximus Trevisan, a man I'd never considered husband material. There were fewer guests than planned because Paolo's huge family was no longer attending, naturally. Maximus didn't have much family, at least not family he was on speaking terms with. I was glad. I wanted a small affair. The big wedding I desired in the past now only made me nervous. And we still had 80 guests, more than enough attention in my current situation. "How do you feel?" Mom asked as she came up behind me, her worried face reflecting in the mirror. I gave a small shrug. "Nauseous." The morning sickness everyone talked about was an all-day sickness in my case. I was 11 weeks along and was waiting for the nausea to finally stop. "Take a sip of lemon water." I accepted the glass Mom held out to me and took a gulp. "And mentally?" I wasn't sure what I felt. Definitely nervous, but not in a way I'd hoped I'd feel on my wedding day. I was nervous about how things would be between Maximus and me. I still barely knew him. We'd talked 3 times and seen each other twice since he'd agreed to marry me. He seemed to be doing okay with what happened. Mostly I tried to pretend I did too, but especially at night, the memories haunted me. Try to enjoy today, even if it's not the day you'd originally planned. You only marry once. You married twice, I said with a teasing smile. Mom pursed her lips. You know what I mean. She paused, narrowing her eyes in thought. You know, you can always return home. This isn't like my first wedding. I know, Mom. And I won't have to kill Maximus with a letter opener. It's going to be okay. I said the last part for Mom's reassurance as much as my own. Mom shook her head. I told you to show you that life can become beautiful even after a bleak time. Not so you can make fun of it. I'm sorry. It's just such a crazy story. It's just nothing like you. I can't imagine you stabbing someone or risking an affair with a bodyguard. Your dad and I were always meant to be. I bit my lip. That's true. You're perfect together. Mom touched my cheek lightly. Maybe you and Maximus can be better together than you expect. Mom and Dad didn't have the same baggage as Maximus and I did. A knock sounded and Dad slipped inside.
Are you ready to go?
He froze when he saw me in the dress.
You're stunning.
Thanks, Dad. I still loved the dress. It was a satin piece with long-laced sleeves and a scalloped neck. The flared skirt protected the very slight bump that only I noticed. A floral tiara with small crystals sat atop my head, and my hair was in a low updo at the nape of my neck. He stared at me for a while longer, then toward Mom, and they exchanged an emotionally charged look, which made me emotional too, something I really didn't want. I needed to keep my emotions bottled up today if I wanted to appear as a somewhat content bride.
And are you ready to go?
I didn't feel ready. Mostly I felt nauseous despite the medication I'd taken. My pregnancy was still a closely guarded secret, so I really couldn't risk throwing up anywhere public today. Of course, everyone would know about it soon enough, and it would be obvious that the child hadn't been conceived after our wedding. Still, I was glad for every day that the truth wasn't out.
Chapter 8. Maximus. Nervous didn't even begin to cover my feelings. Sara had hardly talked to me when we met last time, nor had she replied to my last message. I hadn't pushed her, hadn't asked her about the baby or anything about the apartment. I'd given her the space she obviously craved. We'd have to spend enough time together in the future. I wasn't fucking sure how that would work. Our encounters had been polite but distant. "You look ready to puke," Amo commented. He was my best man and currently lounging on the sofa, ignoring the messages from his wife that popped up on his phone. "Your marriage stories don't give me much hope for myself." "Sara isn't Cressida. She's lovely, and you'll soon have a child, so you're bound to make a real effort. Plus, I'm not in love with anyone else. Nor is Sara. That bond was simply a convenient union," Amo said, ignoring my jab. The door opened without warning. "It's time." Primo sent Amo an annoyed look. "It's your job to make sure he's not late to his own wedding." Amo got up with cocked eyebrows. "You did before I could." Primo gave me a nod before he left again. "Is he still mad that you picked me as best man?" I shrugged. He never said it outright, but I was sure he was. My brother and I were close, not as close as we'd been as kids, because we found different friends as we grew up, and I simply shared more of my shit with Amo. Primo was family, and I'd die for him, but I'd always known Amo would be my best man. "He's right, though. We need to go." I followed Amo out of the room where I'd spent the past hour getting ready, even if it had taken only 10 minutes to get dressed, and I still didn't feel ready. When I entered the church with Amo and we headed to the front, everyone's eyes were on me. Being muscled tall and tattooed, plus a member of the Famiglia, I was used to attention. But this attention was different. It was curious, concerned, or condemning. I didn't return anyone's gaze and simply nodded at the priest before I stopped in front of him. I had never been a churchgoer, nor was my family. We didn't talk about God. I wasn't even sure what Dad believed or didn't believe. Mom was spiritual, but not in an organized church kind of way. I wasn't sure what I believed, but I wouldn't have chosen a wedding in a church if it weren't for our traditions, and the fact that everything had already been planned before I entered the picture. To me, entering church felt sacrilegious, because I was committing sins on a daily basis and had no intention of stopping. It felt hypocritical to ask for the blessing of an institution that should condemn me to eternity in hell. But most made men didn't have trouble becoming pious when it suited them. When the music began playing, I turned around to the entrance. Romero led Sara toward me. She was breathtaking. I'd always found her attractive, but she was simply stunning today. Her dress wasn't as modest as I'd suspected. Maybe she would have chosen a different dress, knowing who she was marrying and why. My gaze briefly darted to her belly, but the way her dress was tailored with a narrow waist and a wide skirt below, you couldn't make out a bump. Did she even have one yet? I hadn't seen her in more than 2 weeks, and she'd always worn loose sweaters when I'd visited. I fucking wished our bond hadn't begun the way it had. I wished I could fantasize about my gorgeous bride and what we might do tonight, because Sara was definitely a woman who gave you plenty of reasons to fantasize about her. I tore my gaze away from her neckline and focused on her face. She was smiling. Her gaze focused straight ahead but didn't meet mine. When she arrived at my side, one look at her eyes told me the smile was as fake as I'd suspected. Tension radiated from her. My collar felt too tight, pressing into my still tender burn scars at my neck. Burn dressing covered the skin on my back. It had started healing, but I hadn't been as gentle with myself as my mother had begged me to be. I could only hope I didn't ruin my white shirt. Sara's gaze briefly lingered on the dressing on my neck before she turned to the front. I almost told her how beautiful she looked, but I kept the words to myself.
"Sara,"
"You may kiss the bride,"
the pastor said. Maximus frowned down at me. My belly twisted. If we didn't kiss, the gossip would be even worse. Why was he hesitating? "Kiss me," I pressed out. He bent down and pressed a short, passionless kiss to my lips. I knew our bond was built on a very shaky foundation, but I'd hoped he'd pretend in public. I'd given up my dreams of a romantic first kiss a long time ago. After our kiss, we headed out of the church for the obligatory congratulations. I'd experienced many awkward ceremonies, but this was worse. The people who knew what had happened sent me looks of compassion or pity, and the people who based their judgment on the gossip that had spread like wildfire since Maximus and I had announced our engagement sent me looks of condemnation. The latter speculated I was pregnant because of an affair with Maximus, and that was the reason for the quick wedding and groom exchange. Maximus's expression remained hard and unperturbed throughout it all. His face almost always harbored a certain air of hardness and threat. The only time it hadn't been like that had been during our short captivity and when he'd visited my parents. I knew there was more to him than he let on, and more than I thought in the past, but I wasn't sure I had the strength to find out. Maybe one day. Maximus was careful not to touch me, but when it was time for our first dance, we couldn't avoid it anymore.
"Are you ready for the dance?"
he murmured as the band waited for us to enter the dance floor. I nodded with a forced smile and took his extended hand. He held my hand loosely in his, giving me the feeling that I could pull away any time. With everyone's eyes, I wouldn't, and it wasn't as if Maximus scared me. The demons of our shared past did. People watched our every move, and they continued to do so for a while. They wanted a huge scandal. The last one, Marcella marrying a biker, was getting to be old news, and they were hungry for fresh meat. When we arrived on the dance floor, Maximus gave me a questioning look. I nodded, and he pulled me against him. I put my hand on his shoulder, and he put one hand on my back, not too far up and not too low. Our gazes met, and that felt more intimate than our closeness. It was almost as if I could see the guilt burning in his eyes, and thus the reminder of what happened. I lowered my gaze to his nose, not wanting to remember. My eyes registered the dressing over his neck once more. He was moving a little stiffly, as if his neck wasn't his only injury. The music began. Only now did I realize that Maximus and I had never danced together before. I had never even gotten the chance to rehearse the dance with Paolo. Maximus didn't look like a man who could dance, at least not any standard dances. The dance clubs he and Amo had frequented didn't require that sort of thing. Maximus took the lead without any prompting and surprised me with his dancing skills.
"I asked my mother to teach me how to dance. I knew it would be required today, and I didn't want to embarrass you in front of all these people,"
he murmured. His voice was naturally low and very deep. It was a voice that exuded manliness, but also a subtle danger. I gave a small nod. I doubted anything could ever be more embarrassing than knowing that half of the people in this room had probably seen the video of Maximus and me. It was a thought I rarely entertained, and whenever I did, I wanted to crawl into a hole and never emerge. I couldn't escape the cruel gossiping of our world unless I left, something I'd never even consider. "You're doing good," I said simply. Maximus was much taller than me, so it wasn't easy to find a flow, but his efforts shone through, and I didn't feel as uncomfortable in his proximity as I'd thought. I was glad when we were out of the spotlight and returned to the table. Though even without the lights directed at us, we were, of course, still the center of attention. Mom leaned over to me and touched my hand, her eyes seeking confirmation that I was okay. I gave her a smile, which seemed to convince her. Despite things going smoother than I'd expected, I could feel myself getting overwhelmed by the situation. My mind always judged people's expressions, wondering what they were thinking and how much they knew. It was exhausting. I needed a moment to myself, some peace and quiet. My nausea had become increasingly worse despite the meds I'd taken. Nervousness and lack of food definitely didn't help. After 10 minutes of convincing my mom that I didn't need her support, I left the ballroom and strolled through the quiet corridors. In the past, I'd often enjoyed solitude. I loved being part of a family, but I also liked being alone. It wasn't long before I heard steps, and 2 guys from Paolo's circles headed through the corridor. Their parents were captains like Paolo's, and Dad had decided to keep them and their families invited for that reason. Their expressions told me they weren't happy with me. Luca's attempts to keep the gossip down only led to colorful rumors that made the rounds among those who didn't get the chance to see the video. And even some people who had seen the video chose to believe that the reason I had been with Maximus in a car in the first place was because we were having an affair. My "it's okay" in the video only confirmed their ridiculous assumption. "Whore," one of them hissed as he passed me by, stunning me. The other added,
"Paolo's lucky he didn't marry your cheating ass."
I wasn't sure if I'd come up with a good comeback. I wasn't fond of confrontations, but I never got the chance to figure it out. Maximus stormed past me, grabbed the first guy by the neck and smashed him face first into the wall. Then he grabbed the second by the throat and thrust his fist into his mouth. Blood spurted everywhere. I froze, my belly doing a roller coaster ride that was bound to end in disaster. Silver flashed on Maximus's knuckle, and I realized why his punch had left the guy's face a bloody mess. He was wearing brass knuckles. Both guys sank to the floor and remained there, moaning and clutching their bleeding faces. Maximus's chest heaved, and every muscle in his body was ready for more violence. I stepped to his side and briefly touched his bicep. Even through the fabric of his shirt, I could feel his heat and steely muscle. "It's okay." I'd said those words before, and the way Maximus's eyes flashed with recognition and regret told me he thought the same thing.
"It's not,"
he growled, not looking at me but at them. His eyes burned with barely contained rage and brutality.
"Our capo gave an order. If you don't keep your fucking mouth shut, I'll shut you up."
The guys exchanged a look that spoke of fear. I didn't pay much attention to gossip, but I knew what people called the Trevisan men. Butcher.
"Leave now. And don't come back. Next time I hear you talking shit, I'll break more than your noses."
They scuttled away, leaving a trail of blood drops in their wake. A blood smudge also covered the wall where one of their noses had been smashed. I swallowed down bile as the nausea in my body increased. "I don't like this violent side of you," I said quietly. Maybe it was hypocritical of me, considering I'd grown up in the Mafia world. Every man in my life was involved in violent crimes.
"Then you won't find much to like,"
he growled, the remnants of aggression still swirling in his amber eyes. I'd always found them astonishing. They reminded me of toffee. If only they didn't also remind me of the past. I swallowed. I hadn't considered what life with Maximus would be like. We'd live under one roof. We'd have to get along, even if we didn't live a real marriage. Was he the raging kind of man with a horrible temper? I'd made a choice for our unborn child and my family's honor. My own happiness hadn't been part of my considerations. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath before he glanced around. We were alone.
"I'm trying to redeem myself. You don't have to fear this side of me."
Redeem himself? By marrying me? I didn't get the chance to ask him what exactly he meant because my younger sister Inessa entered the corridor. She didn't know what had happened, for which I was eternally grateful. She had Mom's honey blonde hair but Dad's brown eyes, and how Aunt Aria always said, "Mom's old temper." Maximus gave her a nod. Then he left us alone. He was probably glad to cut our conversation short. "Did you fight?" she asked with huge, curious eyes. "No, we didn't." She pulled a face that made it clear she didn't believe me. "He looks good in a suit, despite the tattoos. Do you know how many he has and where?" My cheeks heated while my 13-year-old sister stared at me without shame. "I don't know. I probably wouldn't find out any time soon." I shivered. Images of what happened threatened to pop up. I fought them. I wasn't sure what to expect of tonight, our wedding night. I hadn't dared think about it. So far, Maximus hadn't sought my closeness, and I had a feeling our wedding wouldn't change it. I was relieved. I wouldn't have to push him away.
Chapter 9. Maximus. I was glad when the festivities were finally over. I could see in Mom's face that she wanted to hug me, but she knew my body language well and could see that I didn't want any affection. She only briefly touched my arm and gave me an encouraging smile before she allowed Dad to pull her to his side. He only gave me an encouraging nod. This probably hadn't been the wedding Mom had envisioned for her firstborn. Not that the location and event planning had been lacking, but everything else was a fucking mess. Everyone from Sara's family hugged her tightly before she got into my Suburban with Flavio's help. I would have helped her climb in too, but he'd been quicker, still keen on keeping me away from his sister. It annoyed the hell out of me, and under normal circumstances, I would have told him off and reminded him that she'd be alone with me tonight. Ours weren't normal circumstances, however. Romero's gaze met mine across the hood of my car. It wasn't a warning like that of many fathers handing off their daughter on their wedding night would have been. It said, "I trust you to redeem yourself," which was worse than any threat could have been. If I'd had any intention of getting it on with Sara, this would have been the point when my dick would have shriveled. Sex with Sara was the last thing on my mind, though. Our ride to the apartment was silent. Sara was pale, and she clutched her purse against her belly. There was the barest hint of a bulge when she was in a sitting position, a small reminder of what had happened and what awaited us in the future. I hadn't thought of becoming a dad yet, but a small part of me was excited of having a kid. The other part worried of how its creation would influence how Sara saw the child. And what about me? Would I be able to forget the past when I looked at my kid? A walking memorial of past sins? During the elevator ride up to our apartment, I finally said, "I hoped you liked the place I got for us. Eventually we'll get a house for our family, but for now this will give us enough room." Sara's gaze snapped up to my face. She seemed to have been far away in her thoughts. "Okay." She gave a tight smile. "You look very beautiful." I fell silent. I hadn't told her so far. She hadn't bought this dress with me in mind. Not that I thought she had any deeper feelings for Paolo, but it still felt strange that he had been the man she was supposed to marry when she bought her dress. She looked down at herself. "I had to take it in. It was too big on me." She had lost weight. Everyone had noticed. I'd heard the concerned whispers of people who knew of her pregnancy. Is it normal that women lose weight in early pregnancy? I had asked my mother, because I'd worried about Sara and the baby. But my mother had assured me that it didn't necessarily mean the baby didn't get enough nutrition. "I had bad nausea, but I take supplements. The baby's size was okay during my checkup 2 weeks ago." I nodded. I hadn't been involved in any of her checkups yet. The elevator came to a stop, and I motioned for Sara to step out first. Then I led her to the door of our place. I unlocked it and invited her in. Mom had helped me make the place more homey in the past few days. Before that, it had been bare of decorations, cushions, duvets, and whatever else women liked. Now, there were even picture frames on the walls. Sara looked around. "It's nice." "Come on, I'll show you your bedroom," I said, then wondered if she maybe wanted to share a bed with me. Bullshit. Not after what had happened. Her expression didn't betray her emotions. She merely looked exhausted and a little squeamish. "It's the primary bedroom. I put my stuff in the guest room, so you'll have an ensuite and a walk-in closet. I don't need that." Surprise flashed across her face as she scanned the lavender-colored duvet and pillows on the bed. It was a color Sara often wore, so my mother had bought linens and towels in that color. "This is your home, too. I don't want to be the reason you sleep in the guest bedroom," she said. "I'll be fine. It's only for sleep." She pursed her lips. I wished I could read her mind. She slowly walked closer to the bed. "Thank you. I'm really exhausted." I nodded again, because while I'd never been a man of many words, Sara turned me into a near mute most of the time. She cleared her throat, then threw me a hesitant look over her shoulder. "Can you unfasten the back of my dress for me? I can't reach all of the buttons." I glanced at the intricate line of tiny buttons following her spine. "Sure." I stepped up behind her, and for a moment, I wondered how this night would have played out under different circumstances. Sara tilted her head up and sideways so our eyes met. Then she flushed and quickly looked away. I reached for the first button, making sure I touched my wife as little as possible. When I reached the halfway point, Sara stepped forward and gave me a tight smile. "It's fine. I can take it from here." I backed out of the room. "Sleep well. If you need anything, I'm next door. I'm a light sleeper." I had almost closed the door when she said,
I have another scan tomorrow morning. Do you want to come?
Yes, I said, allowing myself another look at her in her dress. She was beautiful, even looking exhausted and a little sad. She nodded but didn't look at me. I closed the door, then walked into the kitchen. I needed a drink. I'd had very little during the festivities, but now I needed liquor to numb myself. I awkwardly pulled my jacket off. My shirt stuck to my back. I knew it wasn't just with sweat. One of the scars had popped open when I'd kicked ass today. It was why I hadn't taken my jacket off despite how hot I'd felt.
You're bleeding.
Sarah's voice made me turn around. She stood in the doorway, still in her dress.
Do you need help?
I shook my head. To be honest, I probably did, but I didn't want to burden Sara with the task of having to help me take my shirt off. It's fine. Nothing I haven't handled before.
What happened?
She asked quietly as she poured herself a glass of water. I considered lying, but I wanted her to know that I was trying to make up for the past in every way possible. I burned my back when I blew up a laboratory of the Bratva with Jabba's brother inside. She blanched.
Oh.
I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I'd expected, but definitely not that. She smiled tightly.
If you're sure you don't need my help, I'm going to sleep.
Go, I said with the tight smile of my own. I downed a glass of bourbon before I headed to the second bathroom. After almost 15 minutes and lots of cursing, I was finally out of my shirt. 30 minutes later, I went to the guest bedroom freshly showered and with new burn dressings on my back, and sank down on the bed. It was smaller than the one in the primary bedroom. Considering my size, my feet would probably dangle over the edge half the night. I hadn't wanted to buy new furniture, and had forgotten that I wouldn't get to enjoy the big bed in the primary bedroom. Everything about today felt surreal. This non-existent wedding night was a fitting ending to it. I hadn't expected there to be any kind of intimacy. Fuck. Just the idea of it raised sweat on my forehead. The memories of Sara's crying, motionless body under mine still haunted my nights. I'd never been a good sleeper, but now my nights were miserable. Lying in bed at night wasn't the welcome relaxation of the past. Sleep was now the door to my memories. I stretched out on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, and wondering what Sara was doing now. I fell asleep after tossing and turning for an hour and listening to every little sound from Sara. A scream woke me. I jumped out of bed and rushed out of my room and into the primary bedroom. Turning the lights on, I rushed toward the bed. Sara sat up, face ashen. Her brown hair fell in wild strands into her face. I must have woken her from a nightmare. Her eyes were on me, but the terror remained on her face. It hit me that I had probably been the center of her nightmare. And here I was, thinking I could console her. I was probably the last person Sara wanted near her right now. She blinked and rubbed her face.
I had a bad dream. Sorry I woke you.
I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what to say. I took a step back. Do you need anything?
Just keep the lights on. I'll be fine.
I nodded, then turned and left the room. I went into the kitchen and grabbed the bourbon bottle I'd left on the table. I took a swish, then grimaced. I only drank when I went out partying. Definitely not in the middle of the night. This was as far from a party as it could be. A pity party at best. I pushed the bottle away. Alcohol wouldn't make anything better. There was no way I could fall asleep again after this. It was only 3 a.m, and I couldn't leave Sara alone, so I was stuck in this place. I went to the gym room I'd installed in the former office and hit the treadmill, sprinting at high speed for almost an hour until I was drenched in sweat and feeling marginally better. Except for the insistent burn on my back. I tossed my soaked shirt away and sat on the bench, taking a couple of swigs from my water bottle. The sound of retching followed by flushing reminded me of my new living situation. I rose from the bench and considered going to see if Sara needed anything. But then her expression from last night crossed my mind, and I sat back down. I was the last person she wanted by her side.
Sara. It was strange to enter the kitchen where Maximus sat at the table. He had a cup of coffee in front of him, nothing else. "Morning," I said, to break up the uncomfortable silence. "Is there breakfast?" Maximus glanced at the fridge, then rose to his feet.
There are eggs and toast in the fridge. I can't cook, so I didn't prepare anything. Plus, I don't usually eat breakfast.
I pursed my lips as I approached the fridge. "You don't eat breakfast?" He shook his head.
I'm not hungry that early. I eat around lunchtime.
"Oh, all right. I can grab something on the way to the appointment. I don't mind." I didn't want to prepare eggs just for myself.
We can leave now if you want.
I nodded. It was still early, but being in this apartment with Maximus felt strange. I grabbed a chai latte and a yogurt parfait on the way, but only finished the former before we reached our destination. Maximus and I entered the doctor's office together. I'd been there for checkups 3 times so far. Mom had accompanied me to every appointment, but today, Maximus, the father of my child, was by my side. I stretched out on the examination couch with my belly exposed. Maximus hovered beside me, looking uncomfortable. I pointed at the chair beside the couch. He sank down, dwarfing the chair with his tall and muscled frame. My own heart was beating quickly from nerves. I'd felt detached during the last exams, not willing to really accept the pregnancy yet. Maybe today, I'd finally be ready to be excited. I'd always wanted children and imagined how magical being pregnant would be. But due to the circumstances, I hadn't been able to enjoy the pregnancy at all. It saddened and frustrated me equally. The doctor put the ultrasound sensor on my belly and quickly found the amniotic sac. She explained what she saw so Maximus understood, but she fell silent when the baby came into view. She pushed the sensor harder into my belly and moved it around, but her expression became tighter by the second. I wasn't sure what the problem was. Was it too small? I hadn't lost any weight this last week, despite my nausea and the wedding stress. "What's wrong?" I asked. Maximus glanced between the doctor and me with a frown. "Give me another moment," the doctor said quietly as she kept moving the sensor. She rose to her feet. "I'm getting my colleague." A few minutes later, the other doctor, who had never treated me, sat beside me and took the ultrasound sensor. Several tense minutes passed before she exchanged a look with my doctor, who cleared her throat and gave me a compassionate look. "We can't find a heartbeat." I blinked, not sure what they were saying. "Last time the heart was beating." "Yes," she confirmed, "but it's not anymore."
The baby is dead,
Maximus asked tightly. I stared at him in horror. Dead? I didn't understand. None of this made sense. But how? Why? When? It's difficult to say. My guess is that the heart stopped about a week ago, judging by the size of the fetus. But why? Why didn't I feel anything when it died? Shouldn't I have known? How could I not have noticed that the baby, my baby, had died? Because you tried to ignore the pregnancy. Because you weren't happy about it. It's called a missed abort, and happens more often than one would think. Often the fetus has an undetected gene defect or heart defect and isn't viable. I'm going to be sick, I pressed out. Maximus grabbed the bin and held it out to me. The moment I bent over it, vomit shot out of my mouth. I kept retching even when my stomach was empty. Someone handed me a wet towel and a glass of water. I wiped my mouth and took a few gulps. But I still have morning sickness. The baby can't be dead. It takes a while for the hormone levels to go down, so the body still displays all signs of a healthy pregnancy. Do you want a moment? The other doctor asked us. I realized she was asking if I wanted to be alone with Maximus. I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes. I need my mom. I was almost 21, but I felt like a little girl who could only be consoled by her mother's warm touch.
Do you want me to call her?
Maximus asked. He looked so composed, and it made me unreasonably angry. I nodded, my gaze locked on the silent ultrasound screen. Then it slid down to my bulging belly.
Liliana, can you come over to the apartment? Sara lost the baby.
Sara lost the baby. I lost the baby. A baby I didn't think I wanted. But then why was it hurting so much? Why did I feel as if someone had cut my heart open and poured in acid?
What's next?
Maximus asked the doctor. I hadn't even noticed that he'd ended the call. How much time had passed? There is the option of waiting for the natural miscarriage or a surgical solution. A surgical solution? This wasn't a problem that needed to be solved. This was my dead baby. I closed my eyes, feeling utterly numb. The last time I'd felt this way was when I'd conceived the baby. Was this fate's version of irony?
Do we have to decide today?
Maximus asked. He handled the situation as if it was business as usual. On the one hand, I was glad I didn't have to deal with anything, but I also grew angrier. No, we can give you a prescription to manage the possible symptoms. I blanked out the words that came after. I pushed off the couch and stood on shaky legs as I straightened my clothes. I want to leave, I whispered. I couldn't stay another moment in the presence of this silent ultrasound. Maximus lightly touched my back to guide me outside, but I flinched away. I couldn't bear his touch now. I could hardly bear being in my own body. I just wanted to forget it existed. I reached for my belly, then stopped myself and clenched my hand into a fist.
Chapter 10. Maximus. Our ride home from the appointment happened in utter silence. I wasn't sure what I felt. I had killed so many and witnessed even more deaths. It never bothered me. But somehow, finding out the heart of our unborn child had stopped beating made me feel off. I'd thought I'd become part of Sara's pregnancy today, and instead, I'd witnessed the end of it. Sara's expression was frozen, her gaze empty as she stared ahead at the road. I had never been good at consoling others, and I knew Sara wouldn't appreciate it if I tried. She didn't want my touch or my words. Her body language made that clear. When we arrived in our apartment, Sara headed for the couch and plopped down, still with the look of numbness. I stood in the living area, unsure what to do. When the doorbell rang, I quickly opened it, and my relief upon seeing Liliana was unmeasurable. She barely glanced my way as she rushed toward Sara. The moment Sara saw her mother, her face crumbled, and she let out a sob that seemed to be torn from the depths of her soul. Goosebumps raised the hairs on my arms, and I clutched the door handle even tighter, glad for its solid nature. Liliana sat beside Sara, who fell into her arms and hugged her tightly. The sobs and cries leaving Sara's body stirred up emotions in me that I was unequipped to handle. Seeing Sara's anguish, I realized how much I, too, had been looking forward to becoming a father. Liliana began crying, too. I backed away without a word and closed the door, leaving the women alone. There was nothing I could do. Liliana's bodyguards were outside in the corridor, so I knew both women were safe. With a nod at them, I left. I picked up my phone and called Amo. "Can we do some sparring?" "Now?" he asked, confused. "Yes." "Okay. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Amo's brows snapped together when he saw me in the changing room. What happened? Was it that obvious? I stared up at my best friend from my position on the bench. Sara lost the baby. Amo sat beside me, concern in his eyes as he patted my shoulder. Neither of us was big on gestures or emotional chit-chat. Fuck. I'm sorry, Maximus. I nodded because I was too. I shook my head before I could voice my thoughts. I thought having a child would help Sara and me build a working marriage. But now? What bound us? Only a vow built on feelings of duty. Where's Sara now? Her mother is with her. Sara doesn't need me there, I said without a hint of emotion. Amo tilted his head. His eyes narrowed in thought. Sara was his cousin. Of course he was worried about her well-being, too. She's been through a lot. So have you. I shook my head and rose to my feet. I'm fine. Let's do some sparring. I need to move my body. Amo and I sparred for close to 2 hours. I can cancel the meeting with Maddox. He can update me tonight at dinner. I shook my head. No. I promised to help my parents with the shelter this afternoon. Go. Amo nodded, then grabbed his gym bag and left. In the past year, we'd done more emotional chit-chat than in our entire lives before then. Fuck. I miss the easier days. I picked up the phone and messaged Liliana. I wasn't sure why I didn't message Sara. How's Sara doing? Should I come home?
We're on the way to our place. Sara wants to spend a few days with her family until she's come to terms with the situation.
I wasn't even surprised. Hell, I was almost relieved. I definitely wasn't the person who could take care of Sara in a situation like this. We didn't know each other well, and the baggage from the past still weighed too heavily on our shoulders. And how the fuck could I possibly console a woman who lost the baby inside her? She loved her family. They were what she needed, not a man she had no choice but to marry because of our world's moral rules. Okay, let me know if Sara or you need anything.
You should go see your family, too. It's not a good idea to be alone right now.
I was surprised by Liliana's concern for me. It was hard for me to grasp that she didn't hate me for what had happened. But Liliana and Romero were good people, especially in our world. I decided to head home right away instead of picking up my stuff in my apartment. Primo still lived with my parents when he wasn't traveling for business, so I couldn't borrow some of his clothes. The moment I parked in the driveway on my parents' property, the door swung open, and Mom came rushing out. I thought she'd still be at work in Gianna's gym. To be honest, I'd hoped she was. Her emotionality might trigger emotions in me I had no intention of experiencing. She hugged me tightly. Excited barks and yowls sounded from the dogs in their cages. Mom had closed the screen door, so Bacon and the other house dogs were stuck inside and couldn't greet me. Who told you? I asked quietly. Liliana?
She called me to make sure I was there for you when you arrived. I raced here.
She pulled back and cupped my cheeks.
I'm so sorry, Max. I can't believe how much you and Sara have to go through. It's not fair. Not fair at all. Yesterday was a day of joy, and then this.
Yesterday was many things, but not a day of joy. And today only confirmed what I'd known from the very start. Building something good on a rotten foundation will end in destruction. Mom lowered her hands as I straightened.
One horrible incident won't determine Sara's and your future. You two will have a beautiful family one day. I'm convinced of it.
Mom's convictions were based on wishful thinking. She thought because she wanted something for me out of motherly love, it would become true. Life didn't work that way. Fate had a nasty temper and loved to kick me in the balls. We can't have a family, because there's no way Sara will ever want to be with me. Mom let out a small sigh.
It'll take time, but you two will find your way to each other.
A day of hard manual work would keep the thoughts away, and maybe make me exhausted enough that I'd have no trouble falling asleep tonight. I'm here to help with the new fencing, I said firmly, turning my attention to the dog shelter on my right. After a flood of new arrivals from a secret dog fighting club, with several dogs that needed to be in solitary confinement because of their behavioral issues, the shelter was getting too small. Finding new homes for the dogs was often close to impossible. Today we would build another open area where the more social dogs could live in a pack, plus create a few more solitary cages with enough space to allow the nervous and confused dogs space to run. After a moment, Mom dragged her concerned eyes away from me and motioned to the fencing material on the bed of Dad's gray truck. I knew he was still busy with a client and would be home later. Mom shivered. She was only in gym clothes, and the temperatures were around the freezing point today. I ran hot, so the cold barely bothered me, but even I needed to put another layer over my t-shirt. I headed into the house, and after greeting Bacon and the 4 other dogs, all of them pit bulls, I headed upstairs to Primo's room and grabbed a sweatshirt and a jacket that looked as if a lumberjack owned it from his wardrobe. I set out to work right away. With a pickaxe, I pummeled holes into the half-frozen ground so we could set the fencing posts in concrete. "We have soil drills," Dad grumbled when he joined me in the late afternoon. Mom was inside. She quickly realized that her concern annoyed me and had gone in to cook a hearty comfort meal. She didn't enjoy cooking, but enjoyed feeding us, so she always put something somewhat delicious on the table. I looked up from the 5-inch deep hole. It was the third hole I was working on. Progress was slow, but with every swing of the axe, I felt a little more like myself. Dad met my gaze. His amber eyes searched my face, curious, but not filled with overwhelming concern or even pity. Dad wasn't an emotional man, not even during torture. I was glad for his stoic calm now. "Then we'll use the pickaxe. Hand me one," Dad said, as he rolled up the sleeves of his thermal jacket, revealing his many tattoos. I, too, had more than a dozen tattoos, but Dad still beat me to it. He got down on his knees a few feet beside me and started working on a new hole. Soil and small stones flew everywhere as he smashed the axe into the ground. I continued my own work, enjoying the feel of sweat and dirt on my skin. "There was a point in my life when I thought nothing good would ever happen. Then I was given your mother. Fuck, I didn't deserve her. I probably still don't. But I knew she was my only shot at happiness. It wasn't easy. The circumstances were shitty, and your mom probably shouldn't have forgiven me. But she did, and I count my blessings every day. Our situations are different. Indeed, you had no choice in what happened. I chose to be a bad person." I rammed the axe with even more force into the ground. "Mom loves you. You love Mom. Sarah and I don't know each other enough for any real feelings. Unless you count contempt, which I'm sure she's feeling for me. Love didn't just happen to your mom and me. It took time. Give it time, Maximus. Sarah's now your wife. She'll be a part of your life. And it's your responsibility to make the best of it for her sake, too." I shoved to my feet, annoyed that even Dad wanted to discuss my emotions. Fuck. I didn't need to hear any of this. The only connection Sara and I had died in her womb, so don't tell me what I can or can't do. Dad stayed on the ground. "You are a Trevisan, and I know you won't give up, even if you can't see it now." I gritted my teeth and got back down on my knees and picked up the axe again. We worked in silence after that, but Dad's words of confidence